Okay, bore da croeso. Good morning and welcome to the first meeting of this new committee, the Programmes Delivery Committee. This has the establishment of this committee has come out of a process that people will be very familiar with, where we had a review of the governance, programme governance that we commissioned and supported by the Welsh Government. And coming out of that, we've established, which we're going to pick up on through the agenda, some changes to our governance arrangements that include the establishment of this committee. And this committee will obviously report into the board, and it's here for assurance around all of our major programmes. And we're going to be talking about the scope of the committee through today as well. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website. I think it's within 3 days is the protocol. I'd like to remind people that we might always be looking at the screen if we've got our papers up on second desktops or iPads, and we will be taking a break, a 10-minute break, scheduled when we conclude section 2 of the agenda. And we are scheduled to conclude today's meeting by 12:30, but when I come on to apologies, I'll explain something around the finish time on that in a moment. I don't intend to invite introductions from all the committee and officer members, but if when people are presenting they could introduce themselves, they'd be very grateful. We all know each other, but people who may be watching the recording might not be familiar with individuals. And some people will be dropping into the meeting and dropping out of the meeting. And as is usual, if people who are not actually presenting at the time could have their cameras and microphones off, that'd be very grateful. And the same when we go into the break. So if I move then into the agenda proper, and apologies for absence, Marion Wynne-Jones is the fourth independent member of the committee and is unable to be here today, largely because, and it's the same with Ruth and Rowan, which I'll explain in a minute, is pre-existing commitments because of this being a new committee set up. So both Ruth Glazard and Rowan Gardner have got pre-existing commitments and need to leave by 12. So what I'm hoping to do is that we can conclude the meeting as close to 12 as possible, and probably we ought to be able to make up time on the first half of the meeting so that we allow the full allotted times to the assurance reviews that we've got in the second part of the meeting. So I don't think there are any other apologies, are there, that I'm aware of? No, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. There've been no declarations of interest prior to the meeting. Has anything occurred to anyone since the papers were published? No. Okay, thank you very much. So if we move on to the main agenda, which is to look at as I mentioned in the introduction, the revised governance arrangements that we are adopting as a result of the changes in governance in accountabilities. And this before handing over to Chris on this, we have got our processes, and this meeting is evidence of this, of established to take account of the new governance arrangements. There are still some outstanding items of work that need to be done from a Welsh Government perspective, but I'm aware that they are moving on that now imminently, in terms of contacting existing SROs, senior responsible officers, identifying new programme chairs, looking at terms of reference for those programme boards and the if you like, job description for the new chairs. So I'm aware that is being work is going on currently on that. And I expect things to be moving next week with letters going out and chairs identified. So Chris, if I hand over to you then, just to take us through the revised governance arrangements, which we're going to be asked as a committee to note.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Darling, Board Secretary at Digital Health and Care Wales. So I'm just going to run through item 2.1, and I think many board members will be aware of the background to this, but the independent review into programme governance arrangements has concluded. There are a number of recommendations to try and simplify and streamline arrangements. So I'm just going to summarise the DHCW changes, which aim to ensure additional assurance and oversight of DHCW hosted and led programmes. So from a DHCW perspective, the management board terms of reference have been strengthened and updated to ensure portfolio oversight within those terms of reference. This is an officer-led group aiding the chief executive in ensuring effective oversight of decision-making and strategic and operational business within DHCW. It should be noted, I think, that the management board has always had oversight of the programmes. This is strengthening that oversight and taking very much a portfolio approach to the major programmes that we oversee as an organisation, noting that we have had a number of additional programmes transfer to DHCW over the last 12 months than ever. Also worth noting that programme boards will continue to be the main body, the main driver of delivery for their programmes, projects. So that hasn't changed. Work to confirm the programmes and projects that sit within the DHCW portfolio oversight will be discussed in a bit of detail on item 2.3. Ivan will go through that, but we have undertaken an assessment exercise to confirm the programmes that are proposed to be included within the scope. And this is critical for this committee's role to consider. But it should be noted when we do go through that, that's not to say that the scope of those programmes included can't change over a period of time. It can be reviewed regularly. In terms of delegated authority for the delivery of the major programmes, the Chief Executive, Helen Thomas, has, as accountable officer, accountability for our major programmes, and that's delegated through the relevant lead executive, predominantly through the Director of Strategy, Ivan Evans, and Director of Primary Community and Mental Health Digital Services, Sam Hall, and they will ensure the relevant officers attend this meeting to provide assurance and discussion of the major programmes. Simon, you alluded to the establishment of this committee. It's called the Programmes Delivery Committee to provide assurance and scrutiny over our programmes as a formal subcommittee of the board. And under section 4.6 of the report, you'll see how this fits in with the other two statutory, or three, including the Remuneration and Terms of Service Committee, Audit and Assurance, and the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. The membership of the committees are set out in a table there as well. Welsh Government will continue to hold DHCW to account through the existing mechanisms, the Joint Executive team and the Integrated Quality Planning and Delivery reviews on the delivery of major programmes. And section 4.9 of the paper just covers the actions we're working very closely with Welsh Government on, which they are taking forward in terms of the elements of governance that sit within their areas of responsibility. And just to summarise, the changes that we're making, as mentioned at the start, is to try and enhance the assurance that is provided at a board level around delivery of major programmes, and just ensuring clarity around the governance arrangements. So just asking the committee to note those changes, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions? No, if not, happy to note that. I'm sure we are. Okay, lovely. If we move on then to the next item, the terms of reference. And again, Chris, without any further ado, I'll hand back over to you to take us through this. And on this one, we're going to be asked to approve these and to note the forward work plan that Chris is going to talk to.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So the terms of reference, I think it's worth just starting off before I get into the terms of reference, noting that the Digital Governance and Safety Committee for the last 18 months or so have had an oversight role when it comes to major digital projects, programmes. They've had a standing item, a summary report, which has been noted at their committee meetings. That line around oversight for major national digital projects and programmes has been removed from the Digital Governance and Safety Committee terms of reference to ensure there's not duplication with this committee. And just put on record my thanks to Rowan, the chair of that committee, for pragmatism around the agenda setting and making sure there's been a smooth transitioning and avoiding duplication in terms of what we're proposing to come through this committee moving forward. So in terms of the terms of reference themselves, I'm just going to run through a couple of areas of the terms of reference. So the purpose of the committee to provide the board and the chief executive as accountable officer assurance that effective arrangements are in place around the delivery of DHCW led or hosted major programs, advise the board on the development and implementation of our major programs and key delivery plans, and advise where appropriate, where and how major programs may be strengthened and developed further. In terms of objectives, just to be clear, this is an independent member-led committee of the board. The committee will scrutinise and provide assurance to the board on how programmes are delivered, and they will also provide assurance to the board on the delivery of programmes as a portfolio, so how prioritisation of resources, how programmes are impacting on the wider delivery of the organisation and the transition of programme activity to live services, which are sustainable in the longer term. Under the objective section, there's 3 sections or subheadings: programme assurance, portfolio assurance, and governance. In terms of meetings, these have been set as taking place no less than 4 times a year, and at the moment they're set throughout the next year to take place on a quarterly basis. As mentioned previously, there's the chair and 4 independent members of the committee, and other officers will attend as appropriate. Choracy for the meeting will be 2 independent members, one of whom must be either Simon as chair or Ruth as the vice chair of the committee. And from a governance perspective, the committee must have an effective relationship with other subcommittees of the board. And I know Simon was keen to ensure Rowan and Marion were members of this committee to make sure there was join up from those other statutory committees. And just finally, the committee will provide a written annual report to the board on the work in support of the annual governance statement, to include the programmes that are within the scope of the committee and reflecting the self-assessment and evaluation of the effectiveness of the committee. And Simon, if it's okay, before pausing for questions on that one, I'll just briefly mention the forward work plan. We haven't developed an annual cycle of business. We've put in a forward work plan for the remainder of this financial year with the intention that we bring an annual cycle of business for approval before the start of the next financial year. The key standing items that we've identified, the highlight report, which covers all the programmes within the scope of the committee, is included as a standing item, and then assurance reports or annual assurance reports for each of the programmes over the course of the next 12 months or so, and the corporate risk register. There's one additional item on the forward work plan, which is learning from the Lincoln RISP governance arrangements. Michelle has commissioned an independent review into those programmes, so we thought it would be prudent to make sure the learning from that came back to this committee, so that's also included in the forward work plan. So that's on for noting, but happy to take questions on that. And as you say, Simon, asking for approval on the terms of reference, and I'll just defer to Ivan as the lead exec for the committee. I'm sure he might want to add to that.
Ivan, do you want to come in now with the, is it a question, or do you want to, okay, then go on.
If I could, Josh, Simon, Ivan Evans, I'm the Executive Director for Strategy and most of the programmes that are sitting in my area. I just wanted to comment to say that we've taken the opportunity of this reconfiguration and the transfer from DG&S to a new committee to be as clear as we can possibly be on a few things, and we've worked really hard as officials and with you, Simon, and with other members to do that. There are 3 things that I'd like to call out. One is that we're we're trying to look at the thing. We're trying to be very clear about the definition of assurance and our interpretation of assurance, distinguishing that from oversight, and also being clear about how we can work effectively with program boards that exercise program oversight and assurance within their own domain, if you like. Each program still has a program board, and those program boards are operating those programs as live programs from a program perspective. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that means that there's scope for this committee particularly to look at the closure and transition of programs and their impact as they transition into a live service. Because firstly, to assure itself that there is a closure plan and there is a transition to live service plan, but secondly, then to reflect on how that has gone, by which time the program board may well have stood down, so it no longer exists, and therefore that is a gap in our current assurance arrangements that we can fill. And then the third element is the portfolio assurance. Individual program boards will have a view of their interdependencies. They will understand the dependencies from their perspective, and often there's a lot of interrelation with other programs. But no program board will look at the whole portfolio in the round of all of the programs and what their collective impact and weight is on DHCW. So that is a role very much for this committee to exercise, and that impact has increased very significantly over the last few years. Every year for the last few years, we've either started up or taken on new programs, and it's quite a significant part of our business as an organisation, which you can see reflected in, for example, Claire's finance reports and in the IMTP and in various other things. So I think as this committee matures over the next 12 months, we can define more clearly what portfolio assurance and portfolio oversight means as a distinct thing, different to program assurance and program oversight. So I'm really excited about the opportunity that we can that we have in front of us. And then the final thing, I should say, there's 3.5, which is scope. In the terms of reference, there's a commitment to annually review the scope of this committee. I don't think that is a prescriptive one. I think if we feel that we need in the first year, for example, to review more often or just to check in, I don't think anything prohibits us from tweaking and adjusting and evolving the scope of this programme as we go over the next few quarters, so that we're landing it in the right way.
Thank you, Ivan. David, you want to come in?
Yep, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chris, even. So now that we've got a definition of major programmes, which is in section 2.3, I'd like the definition, and I would agree with the definition of what we've called major programmes. But in transferring what we were doing under DGS over, we've basically got 7 programmes that were being looked at by DG&S that now don't classify as major. At the last DG&S meetings, 5 of those 7 programmes were amber. So I'm uncomfortable that those just drop off the radar of any of our committees. And my suggestion would be that those non-major programmes are added back into DG&S so that we do still continue to provide some oversight on those particular programmes.
Rowan, is yours a different point, or? Yeah, okay, well, let's pick up on David's point then. Who wants to pick up that, Chris or Ivan? Or
Chris, do you want to go first, or shall I?
Go on, Chris, you go first.
My only comment would have been, I think it's critical we agree the scope, so the rationale set out, and I'll let Ivan comment on that directly. My view would be if we add the 5 back in and that's agreed, I would rather they came through this committee than DG&S. I think DG&S is now clean in terms of information governance, cybersecurity, informatics, clinical informatics assurance, organisational learning. This is the programme delivery committee, whether that's major or whether we amend the terms of reference and scope to make it include non-major programmes. That would be my comment. Ivan?
Yeah, well, so thanks, Chris. So I'd agree with that on the general principle of simplify everything we do. It makes more sense to corral programs in one place. There's a balance, isn't there, about the breadth of the assurance that the committee wants to exercise, as in how many different programs, and then the depth which it can go into on the programs that it feels that are most important. I think this is something that we've considered at the Portfolio Oversight and Management Board as well, because it has the same scope at the moment. It has the same boundary, the same scope as this committee. And again, that is simplicity, but also clarity, I think, and understanding. Those programs they still have program boards. They still have all the assurance and oversight within the program domain, as they would have had previously. They're also reported still in our financial reports, in our IMTP reports, in our integrated organizational performance reports. So our general assurance still covers everything. We're not excluding them from any assurance, but I take your point that they don't have a dedicated subcommittee assurance oversight. They would now only be reported up through our general oversight and assurance to the main SHA board, but they won't disappear. You'll still have visibility of them, and we're trying to use the same templated reports for all of our programs and projects as you will see in the pack today. So you'll still have a line of sight to them, except not through a subcommittee, depending on the scope that we determine for this program committee. But I think we should try to keep all of our delivery programs in one place rather than spread them around between committees.
It seems as though it probably does make sense to bring them into the scope, but maybe identify them as a group of programs that would, by exception rather than the norm, so that there is that opportunity rather than going straight to the boards to come through this committee, and mainly to go on to the board. So as David's point, they're not lost sight of. There is somewhere where assurance can be sought if needed, but maybe the terms of reference could identify, make sure there's a clear distinction between the major programs and these other programs. Chris, do you want to come back
Simon,
on this point before?
Can I come back in before we move
on?
So Evan's made a really good point, which broadly I would support. I think my concern is if we've got 5 programs that are not major programs, if we're doing the job of portfolio management, we need visibility of those. So my suggestion, therefore, based on the feedback I've received, is maybe those programs that aren't major programs are not normally reported, but if any of them become amber or red, then they do get an update in the papers for this meeting. So at least we've got visibility as independent members, and we've got the opportunity to ask questions. So if people are happy with that as a compromise, then that would suit the concern that I've got.
Chris?
Well, yeah, I was going to suggest something similar around if any of those became red, there was an escalation mechanism straight into this committee as one option. The other one, if they do sit within the portfolio scope, perhaps they're on the highlight report but not scheduled for the annual assurance reviews, because to be fair, when we've looked at this, we're not going to get round, if the list becomes 20, you won't get the opportunity to have what we're having today in the part 3 session. So I think there's a few options, aren't there, to give you oversight without getting into the detail, unless it gets into a clear red scenario where no doubt you would want to have more scrutiny.
Okay, that seems like a sensible approach. I'm happy with that, David. Everyone else? So you'll draft an amendment to the terms of reference, which would, if we agree the terms of reference subject to this amendment, we could then, I presume, do the follow-up by email, or we need to bring it back to the next committee meeting, because we also need to put these to the board, don't we?
Yeah, so Simon, on the terms of reference, we haven't been explicit about what is in that's in the paper that Ivan's presented as part of the highlight report. So we have referenced it, and clearly, so I think we can approve the terms of reference. The key thing is what's within the scope of the programs we're overseeing that needs to be agreed. And so I'm just looking at Ivan really to make sure he's comfortable with that suggestion.
So yes, I'm comfortable with the suggestion, with the approach, the principle. There are what you'll see in my item later on is the list of programs that were receiving their assurance from DG&S. Some of them are probably actually more projects than they are programs, and also there are some programmatic projects, some things in that area that are not currently assured by DG&S. So I think it would be, we've got 3 months before the next of these meetings. If we can find the time in one of our board development sessions, I think it'd be sensible just to look at right across the board at all of our programs and projects, and then to take a sort of an informed decision about how many of those should come into the scope of the portfolio assurance that we're exercising here, protect the major programs that we've identified. I'm comfortable there are no major programs hiding anywhere else. But then decide, how long a tail to have behind that, and also whether the list that we happen to inherit from DGNS is necessarily the right list, because it may be, but it may not be, and that we could do that offline somehow, not in a private meeting, but in a board development session. Then we bring a paper and recommendations together with the highlight reports back to the next committee meeting.
Okay, fine, good. Rowan, finally.
Simon, it's a very simple point, and I'm just restating it for continuity, because we just touched on it at the last DGNS last week, which was just for the board to recognise that we will have certain major projects, and I'm just going to use DSPP as an example, which is the digital services for patients and the public. We will have an app that goes live, and therefore will be in business as usual and part of the reporting into DGNS. But then there may well be the next stage of its development, and that development piece will come back. So just for everyone to be aware of that, and think about how those are reported, and just make sure that there's the right level of assurance to the board, without having too much onerous reporting. There is not enough resource at the moment, so we need to get the balance of people doing stuff as well as reporting on stuff. And I think the real value that we can offer here, is about the portfolio, the in combination requirements for resources and investment and skills, which was the piece that I think was the thing that concerned me in terms of our discussions, which is why I'm really pleased that we have a compromise for the lesser or the non-major programs. Okay, just for the record.
Thank you, Rome. Any observations, Chris, even on that point of the schizophrenic bits of the programs become business as usual, but still development within them?
Yeah, and maybe some of this will be flagged in Sam Lloyd's update later. Well, or samples, because WCCS is a live service, WPAS is a live service, but live services go through sometimes program or project managed change phases, but also as part of a shift to product, they're always in a development and change and change mode, if you like. So I this is the first meeting of this program's delivery committee, and we are trying to put more definition and shape around it, but as well as more time to look at our whole portfolio put together. There are other things, I'm sure, which we'll want to cover, for example, the future pipeline of programs and projects as they come on board, so that we've got a better understanding, more visibility of what lies ahead of us over the next 12, 24, 36 months and so on. But that's something I feel we should work ourselves into over the next couple of meetings, together perhaps with and I know I'm taking a flyer here, but perhaps with a board development session or something, so that we can just try out some ideas and some thinking about how to do this most effectively. Because I'm very sensitive to Rowan's point about the burden of reporting on our own teams within DHCW and on program boards and in various other ways, that we don't want to just layer more and more and more reporting on top of what we already have.
No, absolutely, and the whole of the process leading to where we are today is around simplifying and clarifying governance and assurance, isn't it? Rather than adding another skin to the another layer to the onion. Okay, thank you very much. If we obviously, I think people are happy to approve the terms of reference and recognising the work that we need to do around scope and that we've discussed. And the point that Rowan made still will need further discussion and consideration, and note the forward work plan. Okay, if we move on to the next item, the programme's overview report, I'll hand over to Ivan in a moment. But as has just been mentioned, as Ivan mentioned earlier on, I mean, we're very much work in progress here, aren't we? And a deal of it is around getting coherence and commonality and a holistic approach to the governance of individual programs in the context of the overall organisation. And one of the things that has come to light and is ensuring that common approaches to RAG rating status are taken through different lines of reporting. And committee members will see that the original publication of the papers had a green overall RAG status for the digital medicines transformation portfolio. That has now been amended to be amber green. That is not a change in the RAG status. It is bringing 2 lines of reporting into a commonality, a common approach. I think that's the a fair way of describing it. So just people, I don't want people to think that suddenly a program has gone from green to amber green in a matter of 10 days. That's not the case. It's a conversation between ourselves and the SRO, the current SRO, to ensure that there's a common approach to RAG rating, and that is happening across all the programs, I think, which Ivan again might allude to in introducing this item. So over to you, Ivan.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Simon. I'll take the report in parts. I think we've already had some discussion about the very first section, which is about the classification of programs, how we've used a weighting and judgment scoring approach to try to work out what is broadly above the line and what is below the line. I think everybody can understand the process that we've done there, the metrics or the criteria that we've used and how we've scored them. So we've showed them individually and how they add up and where the line comes. And there's quite a clear line, you know, on the scoring above 30 and below 30. Program directors and program teams and the portfolio management office that we've established have been part of that process. So I'll just check in case there are any other comments that anybody wants to have on that. This is a tool that I suggest that we keep live and that we reuse as we do our annual review of scope, an annual review of what we should be looking at more intensively, that we use this tool and this approach to do that, if everyone is content. Yeah, great. Okay, so if we then move on to the dashboard summary, in the papers there's a slide deck which I'll move on to in a second, but I'll just put some sort of general comments. And in the slide deck there is then a page for each one of these programs. These are the 11 programs that are identified as the major programs. I just want to give some general comment on this. It's a conventional, you know, sort of red, amber, green, which sets things out in the way that we've adopted it for milestones delivery and for other things in our integrated performance report and various other things. So it's following a similar kind of style. It shows the individual scorings on timeline, scope and resources, and then an overall rating, and it indicates the movement in that rating. And it uses a 4-color banding approach: red, amber, red, or well, red, amber, amber, green, and green. Well, all of which I'm sure will be familiar. The key thing to emphasize, I think, is the programs. They do their own self-assessment. This is not a DHCW organizational assessment of the status of programs. This is not the Digital Portfolio Management Office assessing programs externally. This is programs assessing for themselves. In some cases, they do that with the support of gateway reviews or with independent assessment. And digital medicines, as you mentioned just now, Simon, that had an amber green rating from the Welsh Government gateway process earlier this summer. So programs, they take their own evidence and they take their own assurance and they use their own judgment to consider. However, the thing that I would flag is that there is variation in how programs do that. Some of them will assess their current status against their original timetable and budget and scope. Some of them will assess against the most recently confirmed or the most recently adopted plan, budget and scope. And clearly those are quite different. And I've added a comment in the cover paper actually that for those programs that assess themselves against their original scope. Well, if you fall off your original scope and then you revise, you know, you adopt a new plan which has got a timetable that extends beyond the original timetable, then you are going to be red, and you'll be persistently red for the remainder of the life of the program because you're assessing against what the original timetable was, not the revised plan. So and then because it stays red, it is less useful as a dynamic assurance and assessment tool. So the plan is not to seek to impose any kind of assessment. I think it's really important that programs self-assess, but we will work with them through the Portfolio Management Office to provide clearer guidance and more consistency, you know, kind of a framework that will explain, you know, how the overall RAG should relate to the 3 main the three main areas of on time, on budget, and on quality, and what sort of considerations should be there so that everyone's comparing apples with apples. And in that, we're working quite closely with the medicines program, because the medicines portfolio, I should say specifically, because they are currently the only portfolio that we have. So there's quite a lot of tooling that we can use and can adopt into the portfolio management office from the medicines space. And then my final comment, I guess, on this dashboard summary, and we'll pause maybe on it later on, is that there is quite a lot of red and quite a lot of red amber in this. That is my commentary, my interpretation on that would be that that's partly a reflection of several programs still rating themselves against their original program timetable, and some of that is a historic behaviour that responds to some of the public account scrutiny of NWIS in 2018, 2019, which was very challenging around the re-rating of programs based on their most recently adopted plan, which is standard program practice, by the way. But so there's an element of that, but also there's an element of the pressure on resources, the capacity constraints that we have, the general, and not just within the programs themselves, but within the wider NHS context in which they work, the partners, the stakeholders, the dependencies on suppliers and on health board partners. There is pressure throughout the system, and it's perhaps not that much of a surprise to see some of that feeding through into timelines and resource capacity and other things being put under pressure. So that's all I have on the dashboard summary in terms of summary, in terms of comments. I'll pause on the dashboard summary to see if anybody wants to say anything at that level, at the whole portfolio level, and then we'll go through into the individual program updates in the order that they are in the slide deck.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. And I was thinking, as we're going through it, if people have got a question on any specific item, put your hand up. Otherwise, we'll move on through, because it probably make more sense to do it that way. Rowan, he wants to come in on.
Yeah, yes, and thank you, Ivan. It's a really clear dashboarding system, and I find it very, very helpful, and understand how the programs are self-assessing their status. I'm also very aware that part of our challenge, and where value from these investments starts to be in a position to accrue across the NHS in Wales, is as we deploy, and therefore, is there any scope here to just start to suggest where these major programs, their timing of their first deployment? And the reason I'm thinking about that is if we have a lot of major programs all sort of coming down the track, or 3 buses arriving at once, that obviously creates pressures on business change and those types of groups, and they may well fall outside of the programs. So it's just an observation, and it's not necessarily for now, because this is always going to be a bit of a working document for the first few. But has there been any discussion of that?
Well, interesting that you should identify that as a challenge. Yes, there's been a great deal of work with health boards about, I think, what we sort of describe as congestion in the future programs delivery pipeline. So as board members will know from previous conversations that we've had at the SHA board, LIMS 2 and RISP on their own are 2 very, very major programs delivering through a very compressed timetable, which is going to put quite significant pressure on health boards. And then we've got several other programs like digital medicines, like Welsh Intensive Care Unit, and others that are also hitting health boards at the same time over the next 2 years. It is a really very, very busy delivery timetable indeed, and it has for some health boards as well. So there's a lot of traffic. We're trying to work with the digital directors as a peer group to understand that impact, and especially the impact on health boards as it relates to the programs, because again, the programs can't be in isolation. We need to look at them together. I think if you sense any hesitation in my tone, it's the extent to which this committee is able to get into those types of almost week by week or month by month management decision making around the prioritization and the phasing and the staging of things. I think for this committee, my advice would be that what we need to assure ourselves is that there is a plan and that there is dialogue and that it is constructive, and that things are delivering to the plans that are being set. But I don't want to distract from how complicated and challenging it's going to be over the next 2 years.
Yeah, indeed. Rowan, are you itching to come back there?
I think Ivan's hit it on the head. On one hand, you know, we have no business in other health boards' assessment of priorities, resources, etc. But equally, I think just having some visibility to you know, that moment of time of when things are coming is quite helpful, because it's a key portfolio consideration in terms of where we're resourcing. So you know, getting the edge of what we're reporting, I think is critical. But I think just because it's difficult and sticky, perhaps should not necessarily stop us having that as part of the dashboard. But I'll obviously be interested in other IM's thoughts on that. David.
Thanks, Simon. Even I'd agree with the dashboard and the explanation you put around it, so I'm fully on board with that. The concern I've got is around the National Digital Eye Care Programme, which is basically in the process of transferring to us. I accept that the status is red as shown on the dashboard because that's where it was. I'm a little bit uncomfortable as a DGS organisation. I thought we were in the process of undertaking a review and rebaselining the programme, and I would have preferred at some point to see the rebaseline programme being presented as this is where we are, rather than the historical picture of what we've inherited.
Can I allow Sam to come back on when we get to the slide, as we go through each individual slide, and then, you know, and have a focused conversation around eye care?
Yep. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense. Okay. Do you want to move us through then, Ivan?
Yes, certainly. So I'll take them in the order that they're in the dashboard. Just to repeat, Ivan, as I said, put your hand up if you've got a point, your question you want to raise. Otherwise, we'll just move on through. Yeah. So the first, so there's one page. Actually, let me just give a bit of a preamble on the format that we have here. So this is a new format. We've worked hard and at quite significant pace, really, I think, over the last 2 months with all of our programs to standardize on 2 different reports. One of them is the assurance highlight report, which is what you see here at the committee. And then the second is a management highlight report, and is what goes to the management board. Clearly, there are some things that have got commercial or stakeholder sensitivities or cyber sensitivities and other things that are more in the management oversight space. Those go to the portfolio oversight in management board as a private meeting, I guess. We're trying to consolidate reporting onto those 2 reports so that there are not 4 different assurance reports to 4 different audiences, but we can have one assurance report that goes routinely to this board, but to anybody else who needs to have that kind of level of sight of what is happening in programs. So I'd really welcome any comments in general on the formatting and what is contained in these reports, and whether, if I could, I'd like to keep them to 1 page, because there's always this sort of inflation of reporting. But if there's really good reason to expand them, then, you know, we should consider that, so that they become as useful as they can be for this committee, but for other assurance functions or other functions that need to look at these things. And there may be certain themes that you feel are not visible enough, and we'll iterate through those in the way that we've iterated the INTP reporting in the main board and the performance reports over the last 12 months. Evolution, not revolution, I think is the phrase that I've used. So with that, I'll just suggest I'll go through them one at a time. The National Data Resource is the first one which is up. Last reporting period is a quarter, because this committee meets on a quarterly basis. So when we say reporting period, we mean a quarter back and a quarter forward. We've got an annual update review at 20 minutes or more on that later on in the agenda, which Rebecca will be presenting on the NDR. That'll cover quite a few things. So I'll just really briefly highlight, there's been significant progress for this and some of the other programs over the last 3 months, and particularly the go live of the main platform in August, and then the providing of access to that main platform to local health boards through the local data resource in September. And there's also been a lot of work on the communications planning and how we explain to key stakeholders and help them to understand that the NDR is now moving into a quite different phase as it's operationally live. Working closely with Welsh Government, Mike Emery is taking a very close interest because this is a very important programme. So you can see the RAG rating and the comments there, and I'll just stop to see whether there are any comments or questions on this, but emphasising that we'll have a further in-depth discussion on NDR later on.
Back on, Ivan.
Nope, let's go to the next one. So I'm handing over to Sam Hall on Welsh Community Care Information System.
Thanks, Ivan. And yet, again, this is another one that we've got a longer session on in the next part. So I'll just touch on a few things. So firstly, this is another operational system. So WCCIS is currently live for 18,000 users, making around 36,000 referrals a month. So it's actually quite a big going concern that we are supporting still within the programme. It hasn't moved into a BAU situation yet, so it's still part of the programme. And at the same time that we are managing that operational service and moving things along with it, we're also looking at phase 2 of WCCIS. So this is a piece of work to look at where the future for this service goes, in that we have some cliff edges coming with some of the technology that we use, and also the real desire to really put emphasis in the shared care record across health and care, and to put some real thought behind the data and the standards that need to make that happen, so that we can have really interoperable information going into the right hands of the right people at the right time. And so we presented that to the Minister a good couple of months ago now. She was supportive of that. It was born out of the strategic reviews that happened for WCCIS, so it had come with really strong evidence on this was the direction of travel. And so we are balancing both the operational and support of the live system with the taking forward the phase 2 elements of that. The one thing that we are struggling with at the moment, before someone points it out, is the finance. We are struggling with running a live service and also running phase 2. At the time when we kicked off the phase 2 work, we believe there would be some money in the system for that, but obviously the current challenges that there are within NHS Wales and finance and Welsh Government at the moment, we've tried to actually make more savings than spend money, but we are working on the overspend that we currently have, and trying to bring that down with our Director of Finance. But other than that, both elements of the work are ongoing, and we are starting the exit around the original WCCIS work. But Lee will be joining us later to talk more on that.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, I think people will probably pick up any detailed comments, but questions later on. Next, Ivan.
Yep, back to me for maternity. Fridian has also been close, so he may want to come in after me if there's anything that he wants to add. I would say so the reasons for why the timelines and the resources are amber green are because the context of Digital Maternity Cymru is that it's a programme which has received its funding on a, I'm not trying to coin a formal technical phrase here, on a let's get cracking basis. From Welsh Government, from the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, similar to the Digital Services for Public and Patients programme and a number of other recent programmes. And by that, what I mean is that Welsh Government has confirmed funding for a number of years to deliver the programme without having confirmed or locked in the recurrent, if you like, the perpetual funding model. So we reviewed that as an executive team around 2 months ago, and working with the programme board, took a view on whether we should just continue to get cracking and deal with that cliff edge when it comes up a few years down the line, or whether we should pause to give enough time to develop an outline business case and then to have a sensible consideration and discussion with health boards about what the permanent funding model should be. And it was that option that we decided on. And because of that, the timelines are extended. So there's an extra few months to do that work. And there's also, we're recognizing a degree of uncertainty about the long-term recurrent funding. And I think that reflects a type of work and assurance that this committee might want to do in future, which is to say, well, what's the off-ramp? What's the closure and transition plan for this activity, which we really want to see move forward at pace, but we have to think over the horizon about what's going to happen eventually. So it's still, digital maternity is in a kind of a discovery development phase. There's as you can see from the notes, there's a lot of activity in engaging with the market, engaging with other users of key suppliers and various other things to understand where they are, to understand the likely pricing envelopes in order to develop an outline business case quite quickly. And then to take that to health boards and have a conversation with them about what the long-term funding basis is for the programme, which is why it's RAG rated as an amber green at the moment.
Okay, David?
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Evan. I think we've been bold and made the right call in terms of the discussion that you've prompted, Evan. What happens if we get 3 months down the line and because of the uncertainty of funding in the NHS at the moment, we've got no answer? Are we prepared to pause this programme until such time as it gets resolved, or what happens then?
I don't think we've pre-made any decision. I can see that Rudian wants to come in. You know, digital maternity is really important and strongly desired by the clinical community. There's a very strong buy-in. There are other programs as well that we would say that are really important in the round, but also there's a funding constraint from Welsh Government. So I think we'd have to look at that when we got there. But we know, and you know, as board members, how exposed we are on risk on all of the programs that we're carrying that do not have a long runway, and that is that we recognise that in our corporate risk register. So we have to take a sensible approach to that. Rudian?
It's a very good question, David. How badly does the wider system want this? There's hardly a week that goes by without there being a maternity scandal, care scandal in some organisation across the UK. The short answer is, if there's no money, it will have to stop. Okay. So you know, that's the blunt. The concern that we should have is the objective of the programme is to collect, store, and share securely and safely the terminology is women and birthing people's records, so that wherever that baby decides to come out, and there's little control over that, the mother's record has followed her and the baby wherever they present. Now, this is not dissimilar to all our objectives, is it? The care information needs to be available at the point of care delivery. This is an example of a programme that should be done through a standardised process on an all Wales basis because of patient safety.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Well, we don't need to labour the point around the resources. It's being picked up on virtually all of these reports, isn't it, in terms of staffing and the implications and consequences. Ivan, do you want to move us on to the next one, the iCare programme?
Yeah, and I will pass this deftly to Sam Hall, if that's okay.
Thanks again. So I'm just going to pick up firstly on the point that David made about why is this red? It's red because we are still in that pause and review. So the stage that we had was we would hoped by the end of September to have had the new rebaseline plan in place. However, we were still discussing with Cardiff and Vale around some of the key documentation that we needed. So we agreed an extension with Welsh Government till the end of November. There are still some very significant ongoing issues that we are trying to work through. That they are not insignificant, they are quite challenging, and there are and that is in the area of our commercial discussions, which is not appropriate to go into now, but we can obviously discuss. But there is work ongoing, and we are hoping that by the end of November we'll be in a much better position. And so this is likely to change then. There is one one interesting point to make on here, though, is that as you can see in the scope, point 1 in the scope is around Office 365. That was the first priority in this program. One of the things that we have done is we've desegregated that from the program and has taken that forward. So whilst we are in a pause and rebaselining situation, we felt we could progress that at pace. It's something that's been waited for a long time. So this is to support the people that work in that Optom field, who have literally been relying on faxes and paper to be able to get them onto NHS email, so that we can start to deliver that information electronically. And so we've taken that out of the program essentially to be able to expedite that piece of work, and that is actually going really well. And we have agreement from Welsh Government on that and the funding surrounding it. So whilst it is red, there are some glimmers of work that's ongoing. There's also a piece of work currently with Sam Lloyd's team to look at what the best way to technically take this forward would be. So, whilst it may have felt that a lift and shift from Cardiff and Vale would have been a simple option, that may not be the best option, nor the most forward-thinking option either. So we wanted to make sure we take forward the best technical option. So there are no risks up to this committee at the moment, but we are still working through some very challenging elements of this piece of work.
Rowan.
I think, Sam, this is a really good example of why we need this assurance committee, because there's a bit of subtlety here, I think. One is you can see how this then starts to fit in with availability of finance to fund all the things that we'd like to do versus all the things that we can afford to do. So that has to be decisions taken across the whole portfolio. And I think the fact that eye care and maternity are back to back is a sobering reflection of where we are. The second point I'd make is this feels like a different kind of red to a program that is red because things are not proceeding as planned. This is almost a program that is a colour outside of the RAG status, say black, because it is stopped. It's stopped from our point of view until there are certain plans achieved to put it back into an active phase in the portfolio. So just an observation that perhaps we might need to reflect that in the colourway, just to show that we have a break on a programme for whatever reason. Because you could say that that's kind of a green in terms of it's going to plan, in terms of working through this process. So I'll just throw that out there as something to reflect on.
David.
Thanks for the update, Sam. And Rowan, you've nicely expressed the point I was trying to make earlier, which is I'm uncomfortable that this is red because it's something that's transferring to us and we're doing a baseline exercise. Sam, the other point I had was, has this program formally transferred to DHCW yet, or are we in this discovery phase with that decision still to be made?
Hi, David. It has moved. It formally moved in June.
Okay.
So it is a DHCW program now. However, we didn't have all the information we needed in which to reset it as a program in the DHCW world. We still don't have all of that information, hence why it's been extended. There will be a new program board set up. There will be under the new governance, we will obviously set that up in the way we would want to do that inside the DHCW. So at the moment, it definitely is in this hiatus, although we are trying to progress the bits we can around things like the 365. We don't want to delay it any longer. I am, in the way Rydian has said, people really need this to be delivered and are waiting for it. iCare is exactly the same. It is incredibly noisy. There are a lot of people, losing their sight, and we are absolutely trying to expedite everything that we can, knowing that it is in a really challenging situation currently.
Rydian, you want to come in, and then Chris, you want to come in.
Thank you, Chair. As you'd be aware, one of my duties as the Executive Medical Director is assurance that there's an element of safety there included in that. I am concerned about this programme because this needs to be scalable across all areas of Wales for equity of iCare. And that care pathway is quite complex, involving the private sector, and that safe transfer of care to the public sector and back to the private sector for follow-up needs to work, and therefore we need to get it right. So there are occasions where haste causes harm. It's important that we have the assurance of the finance and the governance and the contracts and the commercial element. But I just want to make the state, it's important to do this properly, get it right first time.
I think I'll just make an observation, because in the conversations I've had around this, and I'm pleased to see the approach you're taking, Sam, is that identifying what are the absolute essential urgent things that need doing in terms of a service, being in the best interests of a particular individual, a particular patient, and those things that can take a longer time, as Rydian says, to make sure that we get them right first time, and that again does no harm and is in the best interests of the particular patient. And that's what this pause and review is about, really, isn't it, Sam? I think that's what you're doing through the process. Chris.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on David's question about the transfer. So it did formally transfer on the 1st of June. The pause and reset activity has taken place. As part of that, Sam and Ruth will be aware from discussions at the audit committee a couple of weeks ago that that committee has asked for internal audit to urgently undertake a review of this programme, particularly around the commercial and procurement position. Now, that is what I would describe as a joint review, because a lot of the recommendations will relate back to Cardiff and Vale, who hosted the programme pre-transfer, if you like, but not a lot's happened since transfer for the reasons Sam's alluded to. So I think it's worth this committee being aware of that work that's being carried out urgently, and we are working closely with Cardiff and Vale to make sure we are cited on what that says, and that might help inform next steps, taking into account all the comments that we've had on this programme.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments on iCare before we move on to the Bridgend transition? No? Okay, Ivan.
Great, thank you very much. Sam Lloyd for WPAS and Bridgend transition.
Thanks, Ivan. I'm Sam Lloyd, Executive Director of Operations. So to give a bit of background to this programme, on the 1st of April 2019, Welsh Government transferred responsibility for health services in Bridgend from Swansea Bay Health Board to Cwmtaf Morgannwg. And since then, an SLA has been in place between the two health boards for Swansea Bay to continue to provide ICT services to Bridgend. To enable Cwmtaf to effectively manage data for the Bridgend patients that now belong to their health board, a programme of work has been set up to move those Bridgend patients out of the Swansea Bay ICT systems and into the Cwmtaf ICT systems. So for DHCW, this involves migrating Bridgend patient data from Swansea Bay Welsh PAS, the Welsh Patient Administration Service, to the Cwmtaf instance of WPAS. And it also means assessing the impact on other DHCW systems and services with dependencies on Welsh PAS and undertaking any necessary changes that involves. We have done an initial impact assessment, and there are 22 other national services which are impacted by this work. We've completed some preliminary work to determine the scope of that, and there's now going to be a subsequent series of deep dives which are looking at each of those systems individually to understand what it is that we need to do. In the meantime, we've set out a programme of work which is undertaking the migration of data from between the two WPAS instances, and that's been set out into a series of 7 different data transitions, which are underway between. They started in April of this year, this financial year, and will complete in June of 2024. So that work is well underway. The first 2 phases are complete. We've then got a series of additional phases of work, which will be including testing and full integration and transition activities and so on. The reason the timeline is showing as red on this piece of work is that the timelines which we've currently set out take this work up until May 2025 for full completion, but the funding is only in place until the March of that financial year, so March of 2025. So we're looking at options around that, either to potentially extend funding, seek funding from Health Board, or to bring that work forward. This is a really complicated exercise. We're in the process of putting some additional programme management structure internally around it, recruiting programme management resources, establishing our own internal board to operate. We think this is probably the most complex data migration that we've undertaken as an organisation, so it does require a significant quantity of, there is a lot of effort in undertaking. There is a lot of potential risk of slippage, but obviously we'll be managing that as closely as we can over the course of the next year or so. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Well, Regina has a particular interest in this.
As you know, Chair, I deliver my urological care in Princess of Wales Hospital, and I am directly affected every day by a difference in the data standards between the 2 PASs across Swansea Bay and we'll call it CTM North. I don't think we can overestimate how complex this is and how carefully it needs to be done, because patients get lost in data transfer. And to give you an example of why I raise that is, depending on which icon I have to use on my computer in the hospital determines what I can or cannot see about an individual. And I go back to the mantra, this is about collecting, storing and sharing information safely, a complete as possible record. There is some good news in this that I would like to highlight, Sam, is that that CTM have now decided to adopt the Master Patient Index, the single source of truth for the identity of a patient. That will improve connectivity and safety. So that is a positive. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Rudy. And David.
Thanks, Sam, for the update. Sam, I fully support the observation you made about needing a programme manager for this, not treating it as a project. Question I've got relates to that, which is, what are the timelines for getting a programme manager in place? And given what you said about the funding not quite running to the end of the programme, does the funding that we've got include the costs of said programme manager for the duration required?
The programme manager interviews are actually happening today, David, so
okay.
We'll have somebody on board very quickly. We've managed to fund that programme manager through underspend in other areas, essentially, so but okay. We will be able to hold on to them for the duration. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, thanks.
Thanks, Sam. No other hands. Okay, if we move on then to the Welsh Intensive Care Information System.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm handing over to Michelle for the next 3 items, which are WICIS and the 2 diagnostics programmes. Michelle, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Ivan. So I'm Michelle Sell. I'm the Director of Planning Performance for Digital Health and Care Wales, and I actually lead with my team on a number of projects and programmes, and I'm going to run through some of those this morning. So starting with intensive care, as Ivan said, so this is a really important project, another key area where we are trying to bring a digital solution in to what is largely a paper-based record-keeping system currently. Lots of anticipated benefits there, both in terms of supporting care within the adult critical care units, but also in our ability to exchange information around the system and support the transfer of patients as and when required. So lots of work has been going on. Kind of key summary, I guess, is that the solution, we have a solution that's been delivered working with a commercial partner. It's a single solution for all of the health boards and trusts in Wales.
We have a board in place that is overseeing that, and close alignment with the Critical Care Network, who initially prompted this investment in this area. We did have some challenges earlier in the year when the product was first delivered, and a lot of work at that point with particularly the clinical community. And I think, to be fair, reflecting the fact that requirements had moved on, and there was some sort of kind of resetting really of some of the expectations or some of the requirements that we needed from the solution in order to move forward. As I say, we've worked with the commercial partner and quite a number of stakeholders across Wales to be really clear about what those requirements are and how they would be delivered. Those requirements have now been addressed, and we're right in the final stages of testing in order to be able to go live. So Aneurin Bevan, the Health Board, who will go live first with this solution, and they are in the final stages of UAT now with their clinicians and technical staff within the Health Board. So at the end of that process, and that is literally underway as we speak, they will then obviously make the decision about whether they are in a position to go live. So we've been through all our central testing and validation, and ultimately the decision now sits with the Health Board in terms of that decision to move forward into the live environment. Following Aneurin Bevan, and we're going live first into the Grange, which is their main site, then the plan is to roll the solution out across the rest of the health boards in Wales. So we do have a couple of health boards who already have a digital system, so they're a bit ahead of some of their colleagues. They will sit towards the back of the queue, if you like, in order addressing this. But we anticipate that this rollout now will then roll forward into mid-2025. So I will stop at that point and take any questions.
Just on that, because the what you said and indeed the slide in the deck says that there's mitigation around funding needs to be made available. At what level of confidence have you got that funding will become available to be able to cover the extended period?
Yeah, so we've had, it's a really good point. We've had some good discussions on that, particularly with the Welsh Government. So Welsh Government have provided core funding in order to enable this programme to move forward, as have the Critical Care Network, with central funding that was available, and funding is also coming from the health boards. So the position at the moment is we have identified a need for some additional funding in the year after next, so 2025-26.
Yeah.
And we have set out at a high level with Welsh Government the requirement in that area, and agreed that we will continue that conversation next year. I think is worth probably the best way to say it at this point, with a view to agreeing how that will be provisioned in the year after next. That makes sense. So I think it's a live issue that we need to continue to focus on. So
the mitigation is in the sense there is time to sort it out.
Yes.
That's sorting. Okay. Rydian and then David.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, for information, to inform why this programme suddenly became on the radar. At the outbreak of COVID, it became apparent that one needed to be able to remotely monitor patients, and of course there was no electronic system, so that's why it was accelerated. Intensive care is one of the most cost-consuming environments within the healthcare environment. And it's a limited resource, and we'll all remember that the BBC used to publish the percentage of occupancy of intensive care beds daily during COVID, and that was a real issue for us. Part of the problems we've had with this programme has been changing in clinical leadership. Clinical leadership needs investment to provide time for people to lead in an engaging way, and we've had some issues there, which has impacted on the direction of the programme. And fortunately, we have some excellent engagement now by an intensivist from Hywel Dda, who should be credited with turning around that leadership element. So it just re-emphasises to me the importance of clinical leadership and assurance in digital programmes in healthcare.
Okay, thank you, Rydian. David and Rowan wants to come in as well.
Thanks for the update, Michelle. You've mentioned that 2 of the health boards already have a digital capability. Can I ask if all the health boards agree to take this new system once it's deployed?
Yes, they have, David. In simple terms, I think the wider benefit is having the same solution deployed, and I think that's what those health boards would also be hoping to achieve.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And looks like finally Rowan.
Thank you, Simon. Just to comment there that if we could just, you've talked about the planned deployment over a calendar period. Just a simple Gantt chart at the end as we stack up all of our deployment periods, I think would just be helpful, because we have, RISP and Link and others coming down the pipe, and it would, I think, help focus our minds. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, if we move on to your next one, RISP.
I was going to say, I'll try not to use abbreviations, but we do pick quite long titles for our programs, don't we? So the Radiology Informatics System Procurement. So this is basically deploying a new solution into our radiology departments, and looking at the way we kind of schedule, I guess, investigations in radiology, and also the images. So the PACS part, the picture archiving part, are the images that are taken as a result of those various scans and investigations, and are then held and reported. So we do have systems deployed in this area across Wales. We identify the need for a new contract, and board members will be aware that Digital Healthcare Wales are the contracting authority for what we call a Master Services Agreement. So an overarching agreement that was entered into earlier this year. Each health board and trust that delivers radiology services is then entering into their own deployment order or local contract that sits underneath that. And then our role as an organisation will be to support the delivery of the central solution, working very closely with the health boards, and also to manage areas like integration, obviously, into the wider system, so that information can flow in and out of radiology in the way that we need it to. So good progress in this area. We did have some challenges early on. Colleagues may recall this is one of the programs that transitioned to DHCW in January from what was the NHS Wales Health Collaborative. So that at that point we took on the program, and there were some challenges, I think it would be fair to say, in moving forward to the final stages of the full business case and ensuring that all of the health boards were on board and clear, that funding was in place, resources were in place in order to move this programme forward. So we're slightly behind where we'd hoped to be. That said, we do now have a clear and agreed plan. We have a supplier working very effectively with us. We have all bar one of the health boards have now entered into their local contracts, if you like, and the final one we are expecting to be signed off this week. And I think I'm not overly concerned about that. I think that's just that they've been really clear about local governance and sign off and ensuring that we've got robust plans in place, which is a really helpful stage, I think. So we've worked with the health boards to support them through that process. So now we move forward. This RISP will be one of the areas that we've talked about resources as well. So we are, as an organisation, we are resourcing up to support this process, both in terms of the delivery of integration and the programme itself, but also we currently operate the radiology system. So that is the product that used to kind of schedule and manage reporting on the system. That's currently an in-house built and delivered product by our ops team. Sam will be very familiar. So we are also resourcing up in that area to support the transition process.
Boom.
In order to do that, funded through the business case.
I think we lost you very, very briefly then, but I don't think we missed anything, Michelle. No, not in that sense.
No, it's fine.
I was going to raise one question, which I think you've addressed, but would surely then impact on the RAG rating has got the resources, because I think I heard you right that all bar one, and you're confident that that last one are allocating resources alongside ours. Does that mean that if that's the basis, was the basis of the concern for that not happening was for getting its amber rating, that would now change, I presume, would it?
So we will review that at the board. I mean, Sam may want to comment on that from an ops perspective. There has been a big push, I think, hasn't there, on gearing up Sam within the team. And we are in the process of bringing those resources on board now. So we're not fully up to speed, as I understand it, in terms of where we would like to be. We have time to get these resources in place, but that process is underway currently. So I would suggest that once we've got those resources in place or clearly identified with the plan, then we will review that resource RAG and should be in a better position. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to comment on that.
There's not much to add to what you've said, Michelle. I think, as you said, we have identified the resource requirement. We're looking to fulfil that through contingent labour rather than trying to bring in permanent resources, which will shorten the time frame. So that's in progress at the moment.
Okay, because that's a different point to the one that's noted on the slide, because the risk there was that the health board resource wouldn't come in alongside ourselves. You're saying that that's in place, bar one, and the remaining risk is our ability to deploy resources internally as an yeah. Okay, David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle, I seem to remember the last time we reviewed this, Alison, the programme director, was looking for some additional resource in the PMO. You've not mentioned it as an issue, so I'm assuming, I'm just seeking reassurance that Alison has got the support that she was looking for when we last spoke to her.
Yeah, so we have put some additional resource into the central team, David, in order. It's quite a big programme of work to deliver.
Yeah.
So we are trying to make sure, obviously, that that's resourced appropriately. In order to move that forward. So we have had some new resource coming into the team, and we've got some actions underway really to ensure we've got the right level of resource throughout the programme delivery.
Right. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. And if I say the name, you can use the acronym then, Michelle. So if we move on to the Laboratory Information Management System 2.0.
Thank you very much. I'm sure certainly board colleagues will be very familiar with this programme, and with me probably talking about this programme again. This transitioned to Digital Health and Care Wales in January this year. I should say both on radiology and LIMS, the teams transitioned and have fantastically joined our organisation and feel very much part of the team now. So really good. So this, we had quite a lot of work to do in relation to this programme. So it's previously known as the LINC programme, Laboratory Information Network Cymru. It now has a new name, and I think that was deliberate. It's a decision by the programme board to align with the fact that we have a different approach now to delivering this programme. So we have a burning platform, if you like, in terms of our system that we currently use, single system across Wales, supporting all of our laboratory services. And that was a burning platform, and action needed to be taken to make sure that we had a new solution in place. So we made quite a difficult decision, I think, as a board and across the NHS to change the supplier that we were working with in order to address that issue, and to ensure that we were able to safely transition to a new solution within that timescale. So really pleased. I know we've still got an amber red, which I've been talking to the programme director about. I think when we go to the next programme board, which is coming up, we expect to see that RAG status change, and that is really because the new supplier is on board. We have a plan, so we have a detailed plan to deliver the new solution within the timescales that we have available. That plan has been agreed with our Health Board and Trust partners and with our own internal teams, and it will go to the next programme board now for final sign-off. We have a solution, so deployed into the supplier's environment and accessible from Wales, so we've been able to link into that. And we are actually somewhat ahead of where we expected to be in terms of some of the initial configuration of that solution. So that, I think, really pleased actually with the progress the team have made on what has been quite a difficult programme and quite a significant reset for all of the team that are involved. I don't want to overplay the position. Timescales are really tight. We've got a lot of work to do. And we have quite good discussions, particularly in the programme board. So we've got a really good programme board. It's actually chaired by Peter Carr, who's the Exec Director of Therapies in Aaron Bevan. And we have, a lot of focus on what do we need to do? What is the core solution now? How will we focus on that kind of core requirement, which is to ensure continuity of service whilst getting additional benefit and additional functionality to pathology users? So it's going to be a quite a tight programme of delivery, really focused, and the timescale colleagues will recall, we had until September 2025 to exercise this transition. It's a big change, it's a new solution, and I'm really pleased that the plan that's been agreed will have the first health boards transitioning to the new solution in February 2025, so that we have a plan now that means all of our organisations can safely transition within that window. So obviously we'll keep a close eye on this one. I would suggest as we move forward, really underpins a really critical service for all of our health boards and trusts. But I do feel that we're in a much better position perhaps than we were even 2 or 3 months ago. It's moving in the right direction, and I would expect to see those RAG ratings now start to improve as we move forward.
Excellent. Any questions? No, I think thank you, Michelle. I think we'll move back to you. Is it, Ivan?
It is. Thank you. I'm going to try and speed up because I think we're a little bit behind our original schedule, and I'm sure there'll be a conversation on cancer. So digital medicines transformation portfolio. This is another very large, very complex, very important and much anticipated programme across Wales, which board members will be fairly familiar with. Just remind on the comments that you made at the beginning that the overall RAG rating for this programme is an amber green. In the originally published papers, it was shown as a green, but it is in fact an amber green, which is consistent with the management reporting within the programme itself. And that reflects some key dependencies on suppliers and on other programmes that potentially will cause some delay. But I don't want that to detract from the really impressive delivery from this programme. Is going at quite a clip, at a significant pace. And I'll just draw out a couple of areas there over the last quarter. So the first is on the electronic transfer of prescriptions, technical proof of concept. That is, the sort of the dummy run work has all been validated through August and September, and the service proof of concept, that is the live service, the real transfer of prescriptions, that is just starting now. So we should be able to update on that quite soon. There's really good, strong ministerial involvement with this, and I think the minister's doing a visit to North Wales next week on EPS, on the electronic prescribing service. And then in the hospital secondary care context, EPMA, the major procurement framework that we put in place, we have several health boards, well, 2 that have completed and named their preferred supplier and confirmed their preferred supplier. 1 that's just completed its tendering process and is considering and reviewing the tenders received. Another 2 or 3 that are live, and we've got a good confidence that we'll get through all of them by March. And then finally, on a high, 2 awards for the digital medicines programme last night. The first to Rian, the programme director, as an inspiring individual at the UK IT Awards, and the second to Michelle's commercial team for procurement delivery, I think, in the All Wales Procurement Awards for the EPMA framework. So there's a lot of really good work and a lot of really good progress being made on the EPMA programme, but like on the digital medicines portfolio, sorry. But like so many other programmes, it is a very big, very complex, multifaceted programme of work that is really important for our ambitions for digital across the NHS as a whole. So I'll pause there in case there are any comments or questions, and if not, then David.
David. Thanks, Ivan. Well done to the team, Michelle, and to Rian for the awards they've picked up. Really good. A question I've got, even relates to the we've handed some funds back to Welsh Government. I understand why we might have done that. What have we not done as a result of that? Is it the resource profile is not as high as we'd anticipated, or what's the rationale behind the handback?
Well, the rationale is that Welsh Government asked us to look across all programmes for opportunities where we could hand money back, because of the financial pressures that there are in the Welsh Government budget as a whole, which you'll have seen reported in the media and in the health budget particularly. So we, like all other organisations, have really gone through and looked at some, I think the phrase that is used, unpalatable decisions that need to be made. And in general, those decisions are to delay some of the recruitment or to slide some of the timetables slightly. We've tried to do that with minimal impact on different programmes. You'll see in the NDR programme as well, there's been a significant handback this year. So we're trying to manage that as best we can. That comes back to the overall dashboard, which I mentioned, about we're seeing the amber and the amber red because of the impact on timetables and on resources, but we're trying to minimize the impact as best as we can within the context of the overall programme. And we're going to be facing similar pressures next year as well against all the programmes.
Okay, I understand the logic. Thanks. Does that mean the overall timescales have changed, or are we still trying to manage within a compressed timeline?
No, we're still trying to manage within the timetables that we had as they stand. There is pressure, but we're trying to absorb that pressure at the moment. But I think there's a limit to how long we'll be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we note that when we reduce resources, there are consequences. It's not an action without a consequence, and that needs to be noted. Rowan.
Yeah, so, and Simon, just making that point again, as Ivan says, they're expecting increased financial pressure next year. We have heard through the portfolio that next year is when many of these programs are deploying. So that may well have a level of crunch across the portfolio that we need to start thinking about now. So I'll keep coming back to planning for deployment like a broken record, I'm afraid.
So I don't want to dwell too long on it, but this is not confined to programs only. So DHCW, as core funding, has also returned money, and I think that part of what is happening at the minute is that people are putting in additional effort, and my feeling is that it's starting to become visible that people are overdoing it. You can see the impact on people's well-being, and I think as a leadership group, from an executive team perspective, I think we're going to have to be really careful to monitor and to help protect people's well-being, because people are passionate about what digital can do for the NHS, and when the resources become constrained, people put in more effort, and sometimes some people are putting in more than is good for them, I guess, is what I would say. And we have to guard against that, because the consequences of that actually can be quite significant afterwards, because things can break, and we really don't want that to happen at all.
No, absolutely. And I think at the last board meeting, I raised that point in Claire's report, that it was absolutely essential that managers kept a very close eye on the health and well-being of their teams, because otherwise it becomes a vicious circle, doesn't it? That people do more, people don't become unwell, they then are not there, and there's almost no end to it. Okay, so I think it's absolutely right to raise that, Rowan, again, and absolutely right that we impress upon managers that of teams that they need to be very mindful of their team's health and well-being. Okay, if we move on to the next one, we're on the cancer one now, aren't we? Yes, cancer information informatics program.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. A combination of hail, the council deciding to do some work outside, and contractors moving to knock down the house next to me are conspiring to make working at home uncomfortable. I will do my best to go through this. First of all, credit to the team for putting the cancer informatics program on a page, okay, because that is some doing. And I'm going to have to you're going to have to bear with me, because I think it's incredibly important that members of this board understand the background to this program. So the Cancer Network Information System Cymru, commonly known as CANISC, went live just when I qualified in around 1994, and it is still operational. It has probably fared better than me, to be honest. The dependency and the service was that there were about 1,500 people using the system across Wales. And that meant that the information on individual patients who had cancer was siloed to that particular system. The business case was approved in November 2019, but this program was on the National Informatics Management Board risk register as far back as prior to me being appointed in 2015. Now, as soon as the business case was appointed, a month later, COVID hit. And that means that the timelines were completely distorted. It also coincided with the largest ever procurement of a radiotherapy integrated system, an £86 million contract, and differences across the 3 cancer networks in Wales regarding chemotherapy. So the objective of the original business case was to remove the dependency on the system, which was interfering with the ability to provide continuity of care and service, and Digital Healthcare Wales, or previously NWIS, stabilised the system. And because of the language that it's written in, the backlog of user requirements goes to 2015. So essentially in 2015, 2016, we stopped developing the software. So the good news is in November of last year, the dependency of Velindre Cancer Centre on Canisc was removed as they migrated to the WPAS and to WCP. This then meant that 35,000 people delivering care, the direct care to a patient, would have access to that cancer information. And remember, or I would say, remember, what we're here to do is collect, store and share, make it available wherever the patient. Cancer is one of those things patients have, in addition to other things. The programme is divided into three. That is the dependency for cancer delivery, the dependency for palliative care delivery, and the colposcopy and screening services. And the reason it's red across those is evident in the fact that palliative care and colposcopy have not been off-boarded on Canisc, and I will quickly go into that. But I'm going to stick with the cancer information system first. We've taken a phased approach to the delivery of and prioritised the user requirements within the budget available to us. The funding runs out in March of next year, and we are in negotiations at the moment with Welsh Government for further funding to complete the business case. The palliative care is complex because palliative care pathways, and this is cancer and non-cancer, go across health boards, the public sector, and of course private providers. And of course we work closely with the End of Care Life Board. There is a dependency on integration into numerous PASs across Wales, making sure that patients don't get lost when they move around the service. That programme is, as you can see from the sheet, or the slide rather, has made progress now to resolve those problems regarding where the patient is in the pathway, and the user interface for the delivery of the caseload management of palliative care has been approved. So I'm confident that we're closing in on completing that. The colposcopy service is in 26 sites across Wales on different legacy systems that are configured in different ways. There are three elements to that programme: imaging, the care record, and reporting and assurance, particularly for Public Health Wales. We've now made progress in identifying what our architectural design will be for imaging, and of course we've got the Google Cloud platform that we can use. So that's an improvement. The care record, we've revisited the requirements with the service users and are in the process of getting sign-off, and that will happen before Christmas. So that's a positive. And we are reviewing the complexity of the 19 reports for this service on as to whether they are all required and how we can simplify that to give Public Health Wales the information that they need for the service. So that is why it is red. I'm willing to take questions. I was the lead for this mainly because out of everyone on the screen, only Michelle, Rebecca, and I were actually in post when it started. So that's why I've got the programme at the moment. You're on mute, Simon.
David and then Rowan.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for the update. Brilliant. Can I just dig into what you've said a little bit more? So if I've understood you correctly, we've got some funding for phase 2, and we're basically adjusting the scope to meet the available funding. I've interpreted that as phase 2 will get delivered, but maybe not all the functionality was originally planned. There's another 2.5 years of funding. Is that just for stage 3, or is it to make good stage 2 as well? And the final part of my question is, after the end of 2.5 years, when we've deployed it in its full extent, is there any requirement for funding in terms of developing it as a product, or is it just a program that at the end of 2.5 years doesn't require anything other than the normal support budget we would normally associate with a program like that?
So the last part of your questions is the easiest. Yes, there will be a revenue dependency.
Okay.
We are working with Welsh Government colleagues to identify the cost of that. There is some historical, there's some background to the SLA agreements in 2010 that were supposed to fund the product. Those were not met fully, and therefore NWIS and now Digital Healthcare Wales are having to use core funding to support that services. So we are negotiating that. There is some confusion, David, as to what is phase 1, phase 1A, phase B, 3, 5, the gold option, the silver option. We've had to do a lot of work to map out what you get for each pound put into the program, and I anticipate we'll have further news after the next national. You have to forgive me for not remembering the name of the new program that Mike Emery chairs, the National Investment Portfolio Program Board. I think I've got that wrong, but where the decision making on the funding is, David. So we'll have an update then.
Fine, thanks.
Okay, now and Rowan.
Thank you, Simon. I was just trying to sort of clear in my head the question to ask, but really, and I think there's a couple of additional channel. Well, I don't know whether additional. Your explanation was very good, but I wanted to bring out, this appears to be a platform that is running on obsolete technology. I think I can safely say that, and because it's been in development and perhaps has had even more investment, Rydian, than you have over your career, and that may be why it's in better shape than you. It has a lot of functionality that is embedded in one system, both the skill sets to be able to support, understand workflows in such a system and extract them and implement them in perhaps in a more nimble system are increasingly rare. And at the same time, I don't think it would be contentious to suggest that our ability to treat cancer since the early 90s has been transformed and has a lot more data involved and systems. So, Rydian, I'm just wondering whether that we're really able to see in the resourcing that's being given to this program whether it's appropriate. It's an appropriate level of investment to achieve what we need to achieve, given all of those challenges. And I just really wanted your opinion on that, because I think there is a lot of risk here. It's obviously red, but it's clinical risk as well as technical risk.
Yeah, there is a lot of clinical risk here. Again, I go back to this thing about siloed systems holding information and that information not being available. Colleagues on the call will know that I deal with bladder cancer as my primary subspecialty, and my patients receive their treatment to the east and the west, different postcodes actually, from the hospital in which I diagnose them and follow them up. So I'm acutely aware of the necessity of the availability of the information. As regards to the complexity of cancer care, the fact that we've moved cancer into this into the clinical portal means for the first time 250 million test results are available, including the genetic tests associated. So there is more information at the fingertips of the clinicians providing care. So that is very much a positive. You're right about the legacies. Most people who understood how Canis worked have retired, and they retired quite a long time ago. So we've been moving from a system that did not have a blueprint, did not have a program manual, for us to understand why it was configured in the way it was configured, and indeed what the functionality requirements were at the time when someone had a corridor conversation of, could you just add this button to do this thing? And it was just done at a local level. That being said, the team have worked very hard with the Cancer Network and the clinicians across Wales to understand what their user requirements are. And as you're aware, Ron, there's a big difference between what I'd like and what I actually need. And our objective here is to provide what is needed for that safe continuity of care, and also understanding what the reporting outcomes are necessary to understand how the service is performing and areas where we can reduce variation, reduce harm, and improve outcomes.
Thank you, Rydian. Anyone else? Okay, and I think Ivan, you're going to defer the last one to the conversation in the second part or the third part of the meeting. Yes.
I am. If I could just make one comment on DSPP,
yeah,
on the RAG rating here, and then maybe just a really brief comment just to close this because I'm conscious of time. So the DSPP as a program runs in a slightly different way to most of our other programs, in that it is probably the most product oriented of what we have. So it works on a very agile basis, and it plans ahead on a 12 and 24 week sort of cycle. So rather than working to one long waterfall style 3-year plan, and that means it's slightly harder to RAG rate against the conventional program RAG rating approaches. And I think it's for the program to self-assure and to self-assess on their RAG ratings, but I think the program is being a little bit harsh on itself actually in the RAG ratings that we have here. And I just wanted to comment on that. And then secondly, just to thank everybody for the updates that they've given and for the questioning. Hopefully the deck as it stands and the format in this first iteration has been useful, but are genuinely really keen to hear from anybody, suggestions, requirements, requests for how they would want to improve this so that we can iterate it from one cycle to the next. If you can share those with myself, with Michelle, we'll then run those through the Portfolio Management Office. We'll work with program directors and program teams in order to try to do those so that we are stepping forward into a revised and improved version the next meeting and the meeting afterwards. But thanks very much for a very comprehensive discussion, I felt.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. And I'll make a couple of observations. One, as I said, this is the first meeting. I think we're getting to understand the sort of time things are going to take, and we have overrun, but I don't think that's been due to any us waffling around at all, because I think the conversation has been really helpful and really useful. The way in which, and I think this is one of the beauties of the governance changes that have happened, is having all of those programs using a common approach to reporting on has been really clear and really helpful. I hope others agree with me. The ability to see to have a report in the same format across all the programs is very much about what the new governance arrangements are about. I think, and us being able as an organisation to see what the individual bits, how they're performing and how they come together. So I don't know if people agree with me. I think the format of these slide deck has been very good and very clear. I'm sure there are always tweaks, and I'm sure people will come back to you, Ivan, with suggestions. But yeah, thank you, Ivan, and thank everyone else who presented on that through those reports. What do we do, Chris? Do we discuss them, and I suppose we note as well the reports we've been given. If we move then on to the last item before we break, I think we ought to have a little break just to collect our thoughts and what have you. Chris, over to you on the corporate risk register.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So the report includes the DHEW risk appetite position and associated information. It's there as a reminder as a new committee in terms of our approach to risk. We take a committee assignment approach. So the corporate risks that are on the corporate risk register that are related to programs, major programs, will going forward sit on this committee for oversight and scrutiny, and therefore portfolio oversight of threats and opportunities of the aggregation of those risks as a whole will sit through this committee. To date, there are a number of risks that have had oversight through the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, so they are the ones that are transferring over. At the moment, there's 7 corporate risks. 3 are private, so they're not included in the papers for today. 4 public risks. There were 2 risks that were noted last week at the Digital Governance and Safety Committee that were mitigated down that aren't in the papers today because of that mitigation. And there is one correction, and thanks to David for identifying this, not related to this committee actually, but the Choose Pharmacy 0329 risk should say audit and assurance assignment. I'm just going to quickly run through the 4 corporate risks. I think will be covered in part 3 or have been covered. So 0322, the NDR phase 3 funding. Ivan, I'm sure funding will come up at the in part 3, and similarly 0269, the switching service data warehouse risk. This has been overseen by the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, but very much linked to the NDR. So I'm hoping that can be picked up there. There's 0324, the availability of resources to support the WICIS, the intensive care programme. Simon, I know you asked about that and Michelle responded in the last section. And then finally, the 0323, the cost for transition and ongoing support for the NHS Wales app. And again, I think that will probably come up in part 3. So it's noting, I think, the current position, moving forward, corporate risks, new corporate risks that are programmatic, that fall within the remit of this committee will come here for oversight, transferring from the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. And I'll pause there, happy to take questions, but I'm hoping that we can cover in the next part of the agenda some of those.
Any questions? No. Okay. Can I suggest then it's 11:22 now, that we have a break until 11:30. And apologies to Rowan and Ruth, I failed miserably in any attempt to land this early, I'm afraid. But as I say, I don't think that's because anyone has not been asking. Has been asking. There's been no unuseful conversation. Okay, so we come back at 11:30. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll crack on because we're going to try and squeeze the 3 reports into time, less time than they were allocated. So I'll go hand straight over to you, Sam. If you are at all able to do a 10-minute presentation and 10-minute discussion, we will be able to give all of the programs a fair allocation of time then. But obviously, I appreciate you'll have planned for a little bit more time. But over to you, Sam. I'm sure you can achieve it.
Thanks, Simon. I was expecting Lee to join us, but I don't know whether he's having problems.
He certainly was in at the beginning of the meeting briefly.
Do you want to change the order?
Yeah, change the order because
Rebecca's on the call. If you want to go,
yeah,
Andy first,
and then we can chase Lee up. Is that suit you? Which one do you want to go to the NDR?
Rebecca, was that be okay?
You're on mute, Rebecca.
You're on mute. And I know you were hoping to see. Oh no, Lee's here. It's okay. Let's take the original order then.
Lee's here. I'll let Lee go.
Right.
I would have been very happy to shift though.
Over to you, Sam. Again.
No worries. Thank you. So although we briefly touched in the first part of the session on where we are with WCCIS, which is the Welsh Community Care Information System, Lee, the program director, has joined us. He's going to take us through a bit of an overview of the program, where we are, and some of the kind of future work around that. And he may have missed the message to speed up a little, Lee, as we've got some time to get back. So if you could, that would be great. Thank you. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you. I will. What I will do is I will be quicker on the kind of introductions and background around WCCIS, because I think everyone on the call is reasonably familiar with the program, and I know we've done previous sessions. And I will jump straight in, but I'll just cover it off quickly. Jump into the what next. So just checking you can see that slide deck. So in terms of positioning, this is the strategy behind WCCIS, what it was supposed to deliver, joined up an integrated care approach for community and social care. Strategic reviews reinforced that. We're still looking to solve some of the same problems that we started to solve 8 years ago. I think we haven't kind of come a long way in terms of digitizing the record, but having a truly joined up approach to integrated services is still the utopia we search for, and we're not there yet. So there's work to be done, but we have come a long way. We've got 19 organizations that are engaging with a digital record, other organizations that have gone down their own path and made progress in that space. And what we want to do is look forwards and see what we can do in terms of bringing that together for the future. The services, it's still a mammoth list of services. WCCIS is many things to many people, and I think that may be part of the challenge that we've experienced over the years, that we have tried to be a single system approach to many different services. And I think part of that has left us in a kind of weaker position, that you're very much a kind of jack of all trades solution to a service problem that is differentiated across the different service lines, not just between social and community and mental health, but even the deeper dive into some of those areas. I mean, social is a very broad area with many different types of service lines within it, with many different requirements. So I think we've looked very hard through the strategic review at the single system approach and decided that things need to change. Some of that is being driven through some timelines. So we've run 2 strategic review exercises, and the big things that came out of that was we need to shift to an operational model now. It's an 8-year-old program that still doesn't have an separate autonomous operational footprint. It needs to be addressed. The service is not going away. Technology, we need to address the technology. The technology is approaching some end of life issues. So the current platform will not last much longer than the current contract. The current master services agreement runs out in March 2027, and the platform goes end of life January 2026. So although we might be able to mitigate that, we need to do something in terms of replatforming. And we have made great steps in terms of the data consistency and interoperability, but we're still a long way from the kind of nirvana that we seek. So we really need to double down on the exercise around data standards, design principles, and consistency across these services, so that they start to do similar things in the same way, and that will allow us to deliver a more kind of component-driven solution to their requirements. So they're really the outcomes of the strategic review. We spent a good part of this year discussing business case with an approach with ministers within Welsh Government. We have a formal approval to proceed now in terms of our discussions around replatforming the solution from the minister. That was given to us in August, so we are driving ahead in terms of the delivery of that, delivery of the planning and discovery around what a new solution for the coming years looks like. There's further stuff on the strategic review. I'm not going to cover that because, again, I think I've briefed most of you on that before. And there's a slide on usage. I think key usage, we are at 18,000 users now. The current monthly use statistics are around 30,000 plus referrals every month, 80,000 referrals being worked on, existing referrals being worked on every month. The system is heavily used by at least 7,000 or 8,000 of those 18,000 users, but it is a current and heavily used system across Wales. So we need to address what it looks like for the future. I think we started to draft the strategy for the future. I think just pulling out of this, rather than going through all the detail on the slide, I think there's 3 main areas that we're looking for a future programme. One is the obvious one. We need to address the platform. We need to replace the current Care Director version 5 platform with something new, and we are taking that work forwards. We are currently consulting. We're in a period of market engagement at the moment. There's a prior information notice out to the market, and we've had our first market briefings, and we will be issuing an RFI to the market shortly. That is enabling us to fully understand what suppliers we can look to help us shape a new solution. The second element of the work described here is around data standards and digital standards. We have standardized, I think, 12 of the 27 plus services that we currently look after. we need to continue that work. It gets easier each time you move to a new service, because a lot of the services have many common processes and common components. But we need to get to a basis of a data standard for community and social care, and that will drive out our ability to, one, compare data across all of the partners, have the partners share information between themselves, and ultimately between themselves and other services. So there's a strand of data and digital work that is critical to continuing to provide and enable solutions in this space. And then finally, the third tranche of work is really around a shared care record for community and social care. We have lots of elements of a shared care record in our longitudinal databases that are stored in NDR and in other systems across DHCW. And we need to add social and community into that mix. What that will allow us to do is, one, kind of interact better with those other sources of data within the replacement platform for Care Director, and giving access for social care workers and community care workers to access the right sorts of information from primary and secondary as they need it, and then the inverse, allowing that information, making that information available to others as well. Further to that, I think we've taken we are discounting the one application approach that we've had in the past, and we are recognizing that several organizations have gone down their own path in terms of those applications. And again, the one shared care record between those applications will allow us to connect whatever we do for the WCCIS customers in with what's happening in other local authorities and other health boards where they haven't embraced the WCCIS product. So producing a shared care record that enables the systems to talk together and store data so that all services can access an appropriate view of the patient or citizen for social care. So what does the plan to deliver that look like? So as I mentioned, we're in the discovery phase at the moment. The discovery phase is running from September through to about Christmas. We are working with partners to crystallize the strategic approach and understand which partners are supportive of that approach and how we can amend our approach to get that support. So we're working quite hard with partners now. That's fairly noisy, as you can imagine. Many partners trying to kind of shift us to their agenda position or their focus. But I think we're getting a broad support, but there is a dichotomy of views around our approach at the moment and the existence of a national programme. The other piece of work that we're doing is the discovery. So we're currently going out to the market engagement, going out to the market and understanding the full suite of products that are available to us and services that are available to us to help us to solve those three challenges of data, digital standards, consistency and interoperability, the replacement for Care Director, and ultimately a shared care record. We have lots of tools and internal capability as well that we are exploring. We have a reuse principle around what we're doing. We're not designing a new world where a world already exists within DHCW. So we will look to reuse the capability with NDR and others wherever possible. So once we've finished that discovery, we'll produce a draft full business case. The aim is to have at least the kind of the major elements of that in some shape by Christmas, so that it can be reviewed by ministers and stakeholders with a view to understanding what the challenges are, the financial profile and the strategic challenges are this financial year, so that can be teed up appropriately for the next financial year. It's a very challenging timeline, but the timeline is challenging whatever way you look at it. So our aim is to conclude that discovery, draft potential procurement documents for a replacement system and a full business case for assessment by Welsh Government by Christmas. It's very aggressive, but we're making good progress around it. We are talking to partners and Welsh Government to engender a good amount of pragmatism. The biggest challenge I think we've got as to how fast we can move forwards is how we seek approval for all of this from 29 organisations across Wales and Welsh Government. So again, working very closely with partners to understand how we might get that appropriate approval or operate with an appropriate amount of risk whilst approvals are sought at each particular stage. It's a very challenging environment, but it's also very enjoyable at the moment. So it's a great programme, and I think it's a great prospect as we look forwards. So there's some work on benefits and things in the slides as well, which we're feeding into that full business case. But I think that's probably a good canter through that, and I hope that fulfills on the go quicker requirement that Sam suggested.
Thank you, Lee. It's always great to hear someone saying that really difficult stuff is really enjoyable. So well done, Lee. Any do you want to take your slide down so I can see people? Ivan.
Thanks. So comment and 2 brief questions, which I'm trying to align to the terms of reference of this committee specifically. So the comment first is it's for the programme board and for the programme team to determine the choices and the prioritisation that you're making about the route forward. But as Sam knows, I really strongly support the approach that you are taking. And I think that the slide with the title long-term programme view, where you set that out against our missions and selected portfolios from the DHCW IMTP, is really helpful in understanding how you're using open architecture principles and separation of data layer and these types of things to drive forward the program. So I thought that was really helpful. So the first assurance question is one around: do you feel you've got the control processes, and do you think you've got the governance structure that you need to be driving forward in this way? Because it's a slight change to the way that it's been done previously, particularly as you move towards components. Have you got the right control and governance mechanisms to be able to deliver that? And then the second one is about interdependencies across the portfolio between yourself and other programs. I really welcome, again, as Sam knows and as you know, I really welcome the commitment to be using the NDR as part of the fundamental data fabric, commitment towards data standards. But you, like all other programs, have got quite a draw on other services and functions. There's a commercial draw, there's an NDR draw, there's a standards draw, and there will be into various other places too. Do you feel that you've got a good line of sight to all of those? And is there anything that this committee can do to give you more support, or that you want to give this committee the assurance that you're on top of all of that?
Yeah. So firstly, thank you for the endorsement of the approach. That's really helpful to hear. In terms of the governance, I think we do have a challenge around SRO at the moment, and we're stuck between we have our two SROs who are outgoing and have been really powerful in terms of the engagement across the community and holding the community together historically. We are looking to the new model of how the portfolio might be managed, and therefore what program governance do we need to instantiate to fill that gap. I think any help that we can get to move that forwards as fast as possible, so that we can get that in place, because I think we're stuck between we can't recruit the right people because it's dependent on what the portfolio assesses to be the right people and what good program management looks like. So but I think in the previous session, in the prep for this, Helen and yourself were supportive of us putting those steps in place for this program as soon as possible. So again, I guess the question is that okay? So can we start to appoint in line with the new model as soon as possible? In terms of the engagement across the HCW, it is quite complex, and we are going to draw on many services to deliver this, and that will increase the amount of codependency between programs. So I think there is a more extensive piece of work to do around road mapping and making sure we've got, selfishly, our priorities at the top of the lists in some of the other services in the areas. So I think there's further work to be done there. Again, I think that's probably an internal management layer that needs to work with me to kind of make sure that we've got those codependencies effectively managed. So yes, there are some things, and maybe helping us support the selection of two new co-chairs to represent on the leadership board that align with the new portfolio model would be something that I'd ask colleagues here to support with.
Well, hopefully that'll be a Welsh Government responsibility. Clearly, I'm sure they'll seek advice and views, and you weren't around, I don't think, at the beginning. We've had correspondence from Mike Emery in Welsh Government that he is moving on that sooner rather than later, within the next week, fortnight. So hopefully across all the programmes, chairs will be identified, and as you say, that means that you can start working with them on terms of the makeup, the board, and the role of those chairs, which obviously is very different from the role of the SROs. Yeah. Going forward. Any other questions, comments? Lee, thank you very much indeed for that. It's really nice to see someone very enthusiastic about the WCCIS program and its future. So thank you very much, Lee, and apologies for compressed time. Move on very quickly. Ivan, take us into the next one.
Thank you very much.
Matt has joined us.
Matt is joining us. Matt was a finalist at Matt and the DSPP team and KNOSL Supply Partner was a finalist at the UK IT Awards last night. So I hope he's feeling fresh as a daisy. Unfortunately, didn't win, but being a finalist is an achievement in itself, because this is the whole IT sector across the whole of the UK. So congratulations to him on that. Matt, just for you to know, you weren't on the earlier part of the meeting. Due to compression of time, we didn't get into the slide in any detail. The only comment that I made was that while recognising it's for programme boards to self-assess their RAG rating, I felt that perhaps you were that the programme board was being a bit harsh on itself, actually. And also, I flagged how DSPP is working in a very product-oriented type of approach, which I'm sure you'll run us through now. So there may be some questions on those things. If you could pick those up in the next 20 minutes or so, that would be great. But other than that, I'll just hand over to you now.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Chair. I'll just share my slide deck, so just bear with me a second. I'm coming to you from capital of England today. Hold on a second. There we go. Right, hopefully that should be coming through onto your screens. Now, we're all aware that the NHS Wales app is the digital front door for the NHS in Wales. The development of our app is there to empower patients and the public in terms of how they take greater responsibility for their own health and care. The approach which we followed has been one of agile and iterative. What this means is it means that we're responding to what the public want. We're not holding back. We're seeking to put the app out there to learn and then to continually improve. So I want to make that context first off. The next slide, which I'll just go to, really talks about the nature of our approach. And it's very much in partnership, collaborating with national programmes, collaborating with health boards and trusts across Wales. On the left of the slide, the app itself, secure, extensible core platform, allows the ability to personalise to great cohorts across Wales, and it's an amazingly powerful communication tool, allowing us to be able to understand users' preferences and to be able to build on their preferences for how they want to be communicated with, but also to be able to communicate with members of the public as well. And that could be important in terms of future national campaigns and the like. We also have the ability to be able to build accredited services within the app, which provides that one-stop shop to a range of services, which will allow people to be able to manage their own health and care. So really that preventative aspect is important. Now, as we move along the sort of the right axis in a way, is that we've highlighted a number of strategic programs and the type of functions and services which could be enabled with the NHS Wales app. Some of those we've done a bit of work on, the nature of that core functionality in primary care linked to prescriptions, summary records and appointments, but there are other areas which we want to go at. But the key thing for us is that we're not technology led. We need to work collaboratively with those people who are providing care at the front line, so that actually the benefits of the NHS Wales app provide benefits to them in the way that they're able to support members of the public and provide services to them. So I want to emphasise that particular slide. It's important, I think, to recognise that the nature of the NHS Wales app and what we've done has distinct phases. First phase was a development phase. We went in November 2021 with a code base and a development partner and started from scratch. And in a little over 11 months, we were able to develop the NHS Wales app insofar that we could then launch it into a private beta phase with 10 GP practices and 706 patients, which we commenced in October of last year, so not that long ago. We were able to use the feedback from those practices, from patients, to be able to further improve the NHS Wales app, which allowed us to commence a public beta phase in April of this year. So on the 17th of April, we were able to provide the NHS Wales app to everybody in Wales. It was important to us, whilst at the same time allowed us to focus on adopting all GP practices, all 380 or so GP practices, and to expand the number of people gaining benefit from the app, and to a bit of expand actually what the app's able to do as a core platform, as well as kind of future integration. And then that takes us to where we want to get to. So the end of a public beta phase, and then the start of an expansion phase, which really accelerates the number of users that are getting benefit from the app. It also builds new features, works with partners, and really provides that richness. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, we can't do that all on our own. We need to work really, really well with others. And this is where the opportunity space is. I'm now going to play a short video, about a 3-minute video, which provides a really granular look at the NHS Wales app, which many of you are able to access and are able to use, as well as the opportunity space and what's on our kind of extended roadmap. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. So I'll just put this video on, lasts about 3 minutes.
Welcome to your NHS Wales app. When you first access the app, you will be asked to find and select your GP practice. You can do this by entering your postcode or your GP's postcode if you know it. From there, you can select your GP as your primary centre for care. To access your account, you can log in via NHS Login. You may have already set up and used the NHS login system before to get your COVID-19 pass. If not, we will help you through our help pages to create one. You will be able to use your smart device capabilities such as fingerprint and facial recognition to access the app. For users who do not have access to such devices, a website version is available allowing access to a similar password protected and safe process. The app has been meticulously designed with ease of use and accessibility in mind. The top navigation bar allows users to return to their home screen, choose to switch between Welsh and English language preferences, find help using the app, and to view in-app messages. The first of our live integrations with services already accessible by the public in Wales allows users to easily navigate to the 111 service to get help with their symptoms, find local services, and access health tips. The Appointments feature allows you to create, edit, and manage appointments as enabled by your GP practice within the NHS Wales app. The core of this great feature is the booking engine, which can be utilised for many other appointment scheduling outside of primary care in the future. The Prescriptions feature allows you to order repeat and non-repeat prescriptions from your GP, with an optional additional notes section for patients to provide more information. The Health Record feature allows you to view your medical records online. This may contain information such as allergies, medicines, immunizations, health conditions, test results, and more. New functionality, which is being built and will be coming in future releases, includes the About Me section, enabling you to create your own personal health record within the app. Work is also currently being done on the Health Timeline, which provides a chronological view of patients' health events and a health journal to help capture your own entries. And this is only the beginning. We have a growing roadmap of new functionality for health and care to explore and build to bring further value to the people of Wales.
So if I move on, the key thing for us is having the NHS Wales app available to all members of the public, because it gives us credibility. It's there. It's no longer a pipe dream. Now, the deployment phase is really, really important to us because it gives us scale and reach. in terms of availability, in terms of believability. Our aim is to be able to adopt all GP practices in Wales. Colleagues will be aware that there are 2 GP system suppliers currently, and our work in the early part of public beta from April through to June, July was focused with one of those particular cohorts of GP practices because they were available to work with us. We were then in the summer period able to start work with the second cohort of GP practices because the other system supplier was able to work with us. What this meant in practice was that we were able to go from 26 or so GP practices adopted in June and July up to 152 GP practices which have been adopted as of today, and plans to be able to adopt a further 49 practices next week, which will take us over 200 practices by the middle of November. And our plans therein are to adopt all remaining GP practices this year, which is important to us. Now, the slide which I've set out shows the practices which have been adopted to the NHS Wales app, and you'll see that there's a really good spread across Wales. Importantly, what we've been able to do is to work really collaboratively with the primary care team within DHEW to be able to move across, particularly those EMIS supported practices, which has allowed and will allow a transition away from the existing My Health Online service. But it's not just about the practices which have been adopted. The number of users has also grown. As an example, in July, August, we had around 10,000 people who were using the NHS Wales app. Numbers since then have grown to 33,000 as of the start of this week. And the expectation is that the numbers will continue to grow as our adoption plans continue. As an illustration, the number of users has doubled in the last couple of months. Now, we're closely monitoring feedback, and within the NHS Wales app, we've looked at 1,500 pieces of feedback from members of the public, and all of those bits of feedback have been themed to understand actually what's that telling us and what can we do about it. On the positive side of things, people comment about the user interface and the really good design. They talk about functionality that informs and saves them time, particularly in regard to repeat prescriptions ordering. On the negative side of things, the themes which we pick out are, people would say, a lack of appointments or a lack of appointments with a GP. And we think some of that is down to expectation management. They also talk about prescriptions not being available to order, but these being non-repeat prescriptions, and so another expectation management thing. And the last area which really resonates is issues with NHS login and the process of registering with login, which is an important service to us, which we rely upon, but it's separate to the NHS Wales app. And so we're doing all we can to be able to manage that and to ensure that we provide for everybody in Wales. We're also providing important support to GP practices and to patients. For practices, it's in the area of demonstration sessions, engagement, toolkits, reference guides, communication guides, and actually looking to use our business change team to draw on valuable learning where adoption is working very successfully in practices and looking to spread it elsewhere. For patients, we're working really closely with our partners in Digital Communities Wales about establishing champions who can support the adoption of technology and technology means of being able to access healthcare in community hubs across Wales. And so that's really important to us as well, and that's a task which will need to continue. We're focused very much on understanding more about what users want. This is about setting up user research panels. It's about engaging users in terms of issue resolution. It's about involving users in what the NHS Wales app could be and that future roadmap. And so we can take those really important views back to other service stakeholders from the NHS and from social care, and to understand what we really should do, which is going to improve actually what users are able to do using the NHS Wales app. I put this slide on here because, although our adoption of practices has been very successful so far, exactly where we want it to be, we need to get to a place where we've adopted the vast majority, if not all, GP practices before we instigate a national public promotional campaign. So that when we do instigate that campaign to seek to drive up utilisation of the NHS Wales app, but genuinely everybody can access the app and use that functionality available from their GP practice. So the slide which I've highlighted is some of the draft material which we've been preparing, focused on the strapline of your health and well-being anytime, anywhere, which is what we want the NHS Wales app to do for everybody in Wales. The last phase, the expansion phase, is where we're focused very much now. Yes, we're sharing learning and focused in that primary care space, but we're also sharing learning amongst our Pathfinder projects to help with future integrations. The area which we're focused on very much now is leaning across to our strategic programs to understand benefits, and we're looking at waiting list information, we're looking at hybrid mail options to be able to map out those benefits up front as a means to bring that collaboration into being so they can understand what the NHS Wales app could deliver for them. Now, prioritisation is something which is very much matched to user need, but it's also technical feasibility and the establishment of a recognised service owner and funding to be able to deliver. So we have that mix of, I suppose, important ingredients which we're trying to bring to bear with things which we genuinely do. For the future, it's going to be about efficient delivery and benefit realisation, which gives confidence to others that the NHS Wales app can deliver. And it's always going to be about continual improvement in terms of what we do, how we work. The big risks for us, or the big risk, is that we can't do it all on our own. We haven't got the funding to be able to do it all on our own, and we need that buy-in. So we will work with strategic programmes, we will work with health boards, we're engaging with the Digital Directors Forum, we're engaging with our Welsh Government sponsors to be able to bring their influence to bear. But for the future, that is the big area of focus, because the core platform is doing exactly what we said it would do at the time when we said it would do it, but we need that next step in how we extend what the NHS Wales app can do and provide benefits to patients. So I'll pause there, I'll put my last slide on, and they're very happy to take questions from the committee.
Thanks, Matt. I just got a couple of questions from Ruth, who's had to leave us, but I think you've probably covered most, if not all, of what she's asking, and both her and Rowan can obviously pick it up on the recording. But the two questions she's asking is user downloads of the app to date. How many, which you've mentioned, 33,000, I think was the figure you used, and have you got a forward projection? Have you got a timeline of where you'd like to be? And second is that, again, you addressed this really, is the plans for user engagement around future development of the app. And I have to say, I've never seen 4 people collectively look so happy looking at an app. But mind you, that's probably related to those people who are old enough. I'm sure Anytime Anywhere was the Martini strapline when many years ago.
I'm not sure we borrowed that one, but yeah, user downloads 33,000, and that's across the various channels. So that's for apps, and also we're keeping a ready total of the web service that people can access via all. In terms of where we want to get to, where our immediate target is to provide the opportunity for all those existing active My Health Online users who are supported by EMIS supported practices to be able to move across to the NHS Wales app. And so we know there are, give or take, 70,000 of those who regularly exercise repeat prescriptions. So we want to move those across. And we want to then instigate the national campaign. So, we have a target of, give or take, 400,000, 500,000 people to adopt the NHS Wales app. So that's where we're aiming for. We do speak regularly with our delivery partner, and although we have a lot of similarities with our colleagues in England, actually what they achieved was largely driven by kind of COVID and COVID pass related. And so we can't draw so many similarities to say, do you know what, we're going to have 1.5 million people adopt the app by March. If we don't do that, then we're not a success. So I think we're expecting an acceleration in terms of the number of people, but how far we get and how quickly we get, you know, I'm not going to be absolutely definite on. I think 400,000 would be a reasonable target after the national campaign has been instigated.
Thanks, Matt. David wants to come in, and Rydian.
Thanks for the update, Matt. Really good progress. Well done on the numbers that you've achieved so far. Two questions. First is one of the things that as a user of the app I would suggest is holding things back is the availability of GP appointments. I've managed to book one, but that was the exception rather than the norm. I have a hunch that what's needed, because we're dependent on the GPs, and obviously they restrict appointments and they have a sort of a way of dealing with that at the moment. I have a hunch that if we built some sort of triage into the app and were able to point people to choose pharmacy, for example, to take the pressure off the GP, we might actually encourage more GPs to make appointments available. So that's my hunch. So the first question is, have we got any plans to try and incentivize GPs to put more apps online? And then the second question, you've touched on it, but I'm no clearer of where we stand, is this needs an ongoing funding stream. We know that's not in place. At what point does it become critical? And are we running a risk of launching something with the public that isn't sustainable because there isn't funding to sort of underpin it going forward? So I'm a bit worried about a cliff edge of funding going public with the app and it all coming to be a bit of a major issue, which we're right slap bang in the middle of.
Before you come in, Matt, just take Rydian and then pick up everything at both. Great.
Hi, Matt. Good presentation. I'm sure you can predict my question, which is about the shared care record, indeed the detailed shared care record, and where is that actually live in Wales, and what's our plans to deliver it if it isn't?
Thank you, Matt. I'll start with this question. So, I suppose in terms of, I agree with you absolutely, David. I think there is an important need for a care navigation solution to sit alongside the NHS Wales app. Now, we recognise that. We've spoken to the Strategic Primary Care Programme in terms of that requirement. We need buy-in to actually do it. We can't do it on our own. As things stand, the NHS Wales app will obviously allow all appointments to be cancelled and returned. So there's an efficiency gain for all practices, no matter what they provide. And actually, I looked this morning because my GP practice went live with the app last week. And I could see that my practice enables appointments. So I could get a doctor's appointment, not today, not necessarily next week, but in a few weeks' time. But we think that patchwork in Wales is a challenge, and we want to drive some more consistency and standardisation. So I think there's an element of it showing what is available. We're doing that with our engagement with GP practices, and we're looking to be able to share that. But you're right, there is need for incentivisation to GPs, and what I've heard from GPs is they want support with that care navigation solution, which would enable the NHS Wales app. Your second question about funding, that is really pertinent. Importantly, we have funding from Welsh Government through till March 2025. So there's no immediate cliff edge. We have a funding plan for next year, and we've been busily developing a sustainable funding business case, which we've taken through our first stage of assurance with our commercial and finance assurance group, are sharing with Digital Health and Care Wales colleagues, key stakeholders, for their input. And our intention is to be able to bring that business case through the DHW board and the DSPP programme board in mid-December to then be able to provide back to Mike Emery and to Welsh Government, our sponsors, to be able to say, look, this is what we feel is going to be needed. There will be options within that case, but we're giving them effectively best part of 15 months notice to work out how they could support us, save us having to have a cliff edge with the NHS Wales app and having to turn it off. Hopefully that's helpful. And to Rydian's question, we all recognise actually that the information in the detailed coded record would be amazingly of use to patients in terms of how they manage their care. Not all practices in Wales have turned on the detailed coded record. In fact, most haven't. The approach we're adopting is to learn from those practices which have, in terms of the experience of patients and the experience of those practices in enabling it. What we intend to do is then to be able to take that across to other practices. But I think there's also a conversation to take place in parallel with colleagues from GPC Wales about their view, and also potentially with government as well in terms of, you know, future GPC contracts, because there does need to be some incentivization for this. And that's the space which we're in at the moment. So we're pivoting quite a lot. We recognise what could be possible, but we need strong ownership of things where there is a service requirement and a service sponsor held elsewhere.
Thanks, Matt. Any other comments or questions? Lovely. Thank you very much, Matt. Great to see progress. Every time I hear a presentation from you, I check my app and my GP isn't yet there, but you never know, at some point they may be. So thank you very much for that, Matt, and great presentation, and congratulations to yourself and the whole team on the progress you've made so far. If we move quickly on, Ivan, are you?
Yeah, I'll just
introducing.
Yeah, it's me again. So I just want to thank Matt for that very clear presentation, and just emphasize again to panel members how many key dependencies there are for any complex program, but for the app particularly. You know, dependencies on suppliers, on GPs, on practice professionals, on all sorts of on NHS England, on all sorts of different things. So the program is navigating a very, very complex interdependencies situation, and working closely with other programs as well, including the NDR and digital medicines and a bunch of others. I know how interested members are in the National Data Resource. I mentioned earlier on, you know, some of the really significant progress that's been made over the last few months, during the last period, during the last quarter. But I'll hand over now to Rebecca for the slides that we have.
Okay, are my slides? Yeah. Despite being in our office today, my Wi-Fi is dropping a little bit slow and in and out, but perhaps issues in my laptop. Okay, in the interest of time, I know the slides have been circulated in advance, so I won't dwell too much in terms of context of the programme and some of the background, because I think board members are quite familiar with the NDR as a programme. So what I really wanted to focus in on in the time that we've got remaining for the session is really sort of those key achievements and that shift in terms of where we are as a programme, as even set out. So I'm going to jump forward a couple of slides, if that's okay, and sort of start here in terms of our major achievements, I guess, this year. So the NDR as a programme has sort of three main national services that it's now delivered into production. One is the Enterprise API Management Platform, and that is about enabling us to open up applications and open up data in a standards-based, meaningful way, and allow data to flow seamlessly, I guess, across the system so that the right information can be in the right place at the right time. We've then got a care data repository. So the shared care record, I guess, if you like, and that is really the sort of foundations of the digital record for direct care purposes. So actually, our records are our digital record is our data. It's the data that pertains to the care that we've received, wherever that care was provided, on whatever system that was collected on, and that data has to live with me from cradle to grave, and our applications will come and go. So, you know, the whole program is very much about divorcing our application, our data layers, and having that longevity in the patient record through the safekeeping of that data. Then the third national sort of service gone into live is the National Data and Analytics Platform, and this is very much about the secondary uses of that data within the shared care record that enable us to look at risk stratification, population health, advanced analytics, what insights actually can we derive about the population, and how do we improve outcomes etc. So as Ivan said earlier on, I'm really pleased to inform the committee that the Google Cloud Platform has completed its full national assurance. What that means is that those 3 services have service management wraps in place. They have full security and cyber testing complete. The whole platform end to end has been penetration tested, and all of those associated assurance activities. So huge amounts of collaboration, both in terms of, you know, program versus core operational teams, but also with our colleagues out there in the service, and definitely a huge amount of learning that's been going on there. And the other thing I think is really key that sits alongside all of that is the information governance framework for the NDR. So absolutely critical that we understand the legal basis on which data is moving, in which it's being shared and who is accessing that. So very grateful to our information governance colleagues who have worked really closely on us to describe a framework that helps all of us within the programme and our users to understand what they can and cannot do within those quite strict regulations. So really good progress there, but empty boxes, empty platform, empty boxes, and now this is where the fun starts, because now we start to fill them up and we start to get some value from those tools and capabilities. So I'm going to take each one of the live services in turn and just talk you through a little bit about the roadmap and what we can expect to see in the immediate the current phase, I guess, of the business justification case, but our immediate sort of focuses. The lights. Perhaps I'll just leave the light off rather than dance on the camera. So the API management platform, there were sort of some priority APIs identified in the initial phase, and that was really about opening up access to existing national repositories. And when I say opening up access, that is not free for all access to those repositories. That is based on use case requirement, a series of sort of onboarding rules, and a lot of those IG checks that I described to you earlier. The next sort of key focus area, moving on from those existing repositories, will be onboarding the APIs for the Digital Medicines Transformation Programme. So in order to create and maintain a single record, a single medicines record for a patient, we need to be able to onboard APIs that let systems share medications data in a real-time way. So that will be our sort of immediate next area of focus, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute shortly. So that sort of takes us up to the end of Q4 of this year. What you'll see in lots of these roadmaps is 24-25 is largely going to be driven by use cases and requirements, subject to sort of prioritization assessments, etc. We're a lot clearer in some areas than others. It's also worth noting that the API management solution was procured as an enterprise solution, because this is not just about DHCW exposing APIs to data that resides nationally. Local organisations can expose APIs to share data with other organisations and also to share that in the centre as well. So we'll work quite collaboratively across the system to look at what that onboarding roadmap looks like. So I talked about the care data repository, and I suppose a more meaningful description of that being the shared care record. And just to bring that to life a little bit, really, this is all data that belongs to me, Rebecca Cook, wherever that data was collected, on whatever system that was collected across Wales. That's our end game, that's our ambition. And as I said, that's my record. And having that data stored in secure and robust, sort of solid foundations enables those digital transformations that we talk about. And you know, Ridgeon's referred a lot today about the need to have the information in the hands of the clinicians at the right place at the right time. And this is very much about supporting that agenda moving forward. So the shared care record, the repository for it, I guess, is live, is ready for data. We have already seeded that with reference data so that we can identify healthcare professionals, locations, organisation codes, and all of that good stuff that's going to come in with the data. We're currently working on piping demographics in there, and that's a clear, obvious first task for us. We can't attribute activity to a patient without first being very clear on the patient. So lots of work going on there, which is due to conclude at the end of Q3. Then, as I said, we will start to store medicines data, and we already have a sandpit environment for the medicines APIs into the CDR, so that we can start working with EPMA suppliers on those sandpit environments. So I should be talking at the roadmap here. So as I said, medicines by the end of Q4, and then going into 24-25 in no particular order. Our current thinking is that we will start to see PROMS data flowing into the CDR. So we invested some resource last year in developing HL7 FHIR profiles, so interoperability standards for suppliers to share PROMS information. So we can start to ingest that into the record. We're also supporting the SEM work, as Rydian mentioned earlier, in the cancer programme around bringing in colposcopy images into that care data repository, to support that being available within the record in a standards-based way. And also then we'll start to look at encounters. But essentially, you know, what's going to drive that agenda is the people who are dependent on us and how we prioritise those moving forward. I'll get to the prioritisation piece in a second. Far more difficult for us as DHCW to describe a very clear roadmap in terms of what data is going to be available for analytics when. And that's because of the fact that as an organisation, we are a data processor and we are not a data controller. And what that means is we can only process data with a direction directly from a data controller or from Welsh Government. So at the moment, we're going through an exercise to identify what flows already to the centre and under what legal basis. And then we can, those for us are quick wins to move onto the platform. For other data, things that perhaps we brought in under COPI regulations during COVID that has ceased, we'll have to identify legal basis to re-ingest those flows. So lots of conversations happening within the system and reflected in the report in terms of how we're trying to move some of those conversations forward. And not in the slide deck, but I thought it was really important to give you some insight here based on what I've just said, is that, you know, there are limitations on what we can do nationally as a processor with national data without those clear directives. But actually all organisations, all of our partner organisations have their own boundaries now within the platform. So all health boards and trusts have got their keys to their organisational slices. And actually they can, as data controllers, move data into their areas of the platform. And that's really helpful to us because they can help us to start to learn from the tools and the capabilities that we've now got and available in the platform and help to demonstrate the value of that. So, you know, by putting some of that data in there and pointing some of those machine learning tools, actually what insights can we get from our health and care data that we couldn't get before? So really important phase for us at the minute is about getting data in there and being able to do something with it. Just to give you a feel for some of those that we're supporting, I've put a couple on the screen here just from some of our sort of initial kickoff workshops. Obviously huge interest from a Public Health Wales perspective in terms of projecting prevalence and incidence of disease. They're quite interested in how some of the tooling can support some of those initiatives in Public Health Wales using the data that they have. Lots of interest across the whole system actually around automating coding. Actually, that's a huge area of focus for all of us, I think, and one that we'll be supporting really closely. Huge amounts of clinical information in local and national repositories that's free text and unstructured, but hugely insightful. And we want to try and exploit that data and make better use of that, I guess. Just really briefly, because I know, you know, previously the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, who did have some element of oversight of the programme, and also the SHA board has been interested in actually how we'll operate as a service. And I thought it was important to describe that to you. So we do have an operating model that's now in place, with a prioritisation framework that's been agreed by all of our sort of partner organisations as well. So we have a concept of a front door, bit of a genius bar, if you like, where people can, you know, if they have a problem they need to solve, they can have that conversation around the art of the possible and whether they're in the right place. We have put in place processes by which we need to protect our development resources, and I think this is really key actually for this committee, because they're scarce and we struggle with our technical resources. They're highly skilled actually, and we need to retain them and we need to protect them. So actually getting, you know, using their time, that valuable time, getting them involved in conversations when you haven't really thrashed out the requirement, or you haven't even sorted out the legal basis, or it's not something that's got any chance of success actually in being delivered. We really wanted to make sure that our model sort of protected that. So the triage and prioritization stage is all about qualifying the use case. Do we know where the data is? Do we know what it looks like? Are there commercial implications with suppliers about getting access to that data? Have we got legal base, etc.? Then and only then, once you've qualified that use case and it's been agreed as a priority, do we stand up those fusion teams and we deliver against the use case? Our approach is very much based on a sort of agile product approach. And I'm really conscious of time now, so I'll just really quickly whiz onto the last slide. I won't walk through these. I'll assume that you've seen them. This slide was included in the pack. You know, as fantastic as that update has been, and we are in a very good place as a programme, and we're feeling really positive and excited as we move into this phase really of the journey. You know, it is prudent to say that, you know, there are areas that we will pay close attention to, and are investing quite a lot of time in terms of thinking through, and those things are really around that sort of IG and how do we support that, and how do we make things different, what's within our control and what's without our control. I'll pause there, Simon, unless you want me to go in any more detail, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Rebecca. I have one question, which is flagged up by your last slide, really, which is the bit about where we are, albeit it's not us, on the data promise issue, which is that top right corner there, isn't it? The public engagement, because I know I can't for the life remember which Ipsos Mori, was it Ipsos Mori who did some work and they got so far and couldn't go any further because there were building blocks that needed to be put in place by Welsh Government. So my question is, have you any feel of where we are on getting to the end game? And second, how critical is that end game, the data promise, to the full use of NDR in terms of what it is capable of doing?
Yeah, okay, so it's quite a lot on that. The situation around establishing legal basis for acquisition of primary care data remains unchanged, and that those building blocks that you've described in terms of the deliberative engagement as well as the sort of legislative work that's taking place is very much still ongoing and being led by sort of policy leads within Welsh Government with our support. So I suppose taking both things in turn. So there are lawyers involved, both in terms of Welsh Government legal representation and legal representation of the BMA, trying to sort out the differences, I guess, in perspectives in terms of reaching what legal basis looks like. And I'm not close enough, and I'm not going to try to be a professional in terms of the IG world. Ridian, I think, will come in. He's just been spinning on that. But that doesn't seem to be moving forward at the moment. Red, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry to come in there. Just for clarity, okay. So the legal basis for the collection and storage and sharing of data for the primary purpose of direct care is established. Where we put that data, and we already hold a lot of that data, as colleagues are aware, in the care record. The indirect use of information collated requires a legal basis or some form of legislative direction, and that is essentially what Rebecca was referring to there. And then, of course, there's the research and innovation where there's direct consent from an individual to allow specific characteristics within their health record to be used. So we have a legal basis to collect the information for the purpose of direct care. Where we put it, that's for us to determine, but to assure the public that that information is safe and secure and that access to that information is closely monitored. And as you're aware, we have software such as the National Intelligent Information Assurance Service. We are in current discussions with policy leads, my team, led by Darren Lloyd and John Sweeney, and progress is slow but considered.
I think that's really fair, and the only thing I was going to add to that is we want to try and make whatever progress we can in the meantime. So working with, as Virgin said, his team, Darren and John Sweeney, we are looking at what actually is possible today. So what things could we do with primary care data using existing processes for access? Because we do access a lot of primary care data, as you say. We access it for the purposes of direct care, and we have processes to request it for particular analytical use cases. So I think that's where we're at the minute. Is let's try and positively move forward and make progress with what we've got whilst that work continues to ongo. In terms of that public engagement, I guess, which is the second part of that, Simon. Ipsos Mori were commissioned on behalf of Welsh Government by Social Care Wales. I think there was a discovery report that was shared with Welsh Government off the back of that. And I think that there's further work needed by Welsh Government to take that forward. So we're getting regular updates on that.
Thank you, Becca. Chris, before I bring David in, do you want to comment on this point, Chris? Or
yes, yeah, it was just.
Let's just go on then.
It was just to note the next Digital Government Safety Committee does have a deep dive on this topic, and David will sit on that and hear that. So it's just making sure we make the connections across the committees, because it is, of course, very relevant to the NDR. So we can make sure that we'll look at the dates and make sure that's noted here as well.
That's a deep dive specifically on what, Chris?
On the data promise. It's one of the risks that, DGNS are overseeing.
Great, thank you. David.
And it's the biggest risk to our risk register as a programme as well.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for the update, Rebecca. We have got a big risk around the ongoing funding of the programme, in my view. There are three distinct phases to big data programmes, and we're basically just starting the second phase. We've built the platform, we're now loading the data. The third bit, which we may be starting soon, is really using how to use the analytics platform to actually deliver value. And in my experience, the last bit, the learning how to deliver value, is the more complicated and probably takes longer. And therefore, we need to start experimenting in that space with some quick wins in order to demonstrate to the people that are funding the programme the value that the programme can be. And if we don't start demonstrating some value from the money we've spent to date, then there's a danger that with the pressures that are in the NHS, that the funding gets squeezed to the point where the programme stalls and it becomes just a data repository, basically. So with that in mind, and there was an action at the last DGNS meeting, which we just said we will pick up this one. Do we have some plans to start using the platform in anger to demonstrate some early value, notwithstanding the restrictions that you've already highlighted around the fact that we're a data processor? So given that we're operating in a very constrained environment, how we're going to break the logjam and start using the data that's in the platform and the analytics to demonstrate how we deliver value? Because if we don't do that, my worry is that the funding will eventually dry up.
And that's exactly why we're working really closely with the local organisations, because actually, they are the ones who will help us to accelerate demonstrating that value. And that's what we're working with them on. For example, NHS Wales spends a considerable amount of money on various commercial BI offerings for forecasting and modelling. We have been utilising open source tooling within the platform on data as a test for competing with those more commercial products, and actually have demonstrated that we can forecast at significantly higher levels of accuracy every time than the commercial offering. That's a potential actually saving, isn't it, for NHS Wales? So we're trying to identify those pinpoints of where are we investing money already in tooling that actually we can now replace, and how do we sort of demonstrate that? And that working with partners is really key for us, because like I said, their data controllers is their data, is their problems that they're trying to solve in terms of forecasting, demand and capacity planning and things like that. So that is very much our focus right now, David, and you know, I've shared your same views on this. The value, you know, the success of the NDR is not having a whizzy platform in the cloud that's got loads of cool stuff you can play with. It's actually, what does that mean that we can now realise as a result of that? So that is an area. Ivan, I don't know if you wanted to come in as well on that.
Well, I've got a sort of a comment on that, but also a general comment, because I'm very conscious of time. So both of the last presentations that we've just seen, NDR and DSPP, they very strongly exhibit the new way of working that we want. So they are fully modern, fully cloud native, fully component driven, modular, architected systems that are very scalable, and they work very, very closely with their user communities to understand what the users want, and they pursue value in that way on a dynamic, agile, iterative kind of approach. And that is very different to the traditional approach, where we would spend a year before we do any work trying to agree a specification through clinical engagement about what the intended benefits might be, and then we spend 3 to 4 years trying to deliver them. And I think you can see that in the dashboard. So when you look at the dashboard, the greenest column is scope, and the reason that that scope column tends to be green is because very often it's locked in as a procurement specification, and therefore the timetable and the budget or the cost moves, but the scope is protected because it's locked into the supplier contract that we have. But I think the thing that I really want to emphasize is it was locked in years ago, and it's probably out of date. But you know, we're still delivering to that scope that was determined 3 or 4 years ago. But that may not be the thing that is delivering the most value. So I think as an assurance committee, we're going to have to think really carefully about how we manage this, because you can see from the roadmaps in NDR, David, that there's quite a lot of fluidity and flexibility about the 24-25 roadmap. And that's because we're working really closely with our user community to understand what they think will deliver the most value to them, so we can pursue that on a shorter term, more flexible approach. And it's hard then to answer the questions like, well, what exactly are you going to deliver by December 24? Well, it depends what our users tell us is most valuable to them and where we make progress most rapidly. And it's a different culture, I think, and but it's a really important one, and it's one that we're committed to as an organisation.
Yeah, and just to finish up, because I think one of your sort of initial points, David, was around sort of the longer term and the sustainable sort of funding of the NDR, and I think that, you know, the other angle that we're very much looking at in the sort of AAG work stream of the programme is that secure data environment, research environment space within the platform. And you know, the original outline business case for the NDR was predicated on the fact that, you know, it could pay for itself going forward, and we need now to understand what does that look like and what are those opportunities, and actually whatever we do generate needs to go back in the NDR to make that, you know, run as a service moving forward. We are, just to say, programme funded to 2029, so we're sort of halfway, I guess, and starting to think about that now.
Okay, David, do you want to come back at all? Are you happy?
I understand what's been said. I'm still uncomfortable, if I'm frank and honest about it. That the learning how to deliver value from a big data program takes months, years to get to. We're operating in a very constrained environment where we're having to work with partners, and we're not masters of our own destiny. So for me, this is still a big area of concern. It's the speed at which we can learn how to use the platform and transfer that knowledge to the wider NHS, so that we start getting value out of it. Because at the moment, what we're doing is spending a lot of money to create something which inherently is value, but your bit. And I know from painful experience that's where if you don't deliver, ultimately, you know, most big data programs fail, is the reality of life. and they fail because they spend a lot of money, and the people that have spent the money don't really see the value. So that's the challenge we've got going forward, is to work with colleagues in the wider NHS to demonstrate the value that's being delivered, just to make sure that the funding keeps coming. And at the moment, I'm concerned that we're operating in a very constrained environment, which is basically, limiting our ability to do that. And we're on borrowed time, if I'm frank and honest about it, in terms of being able to do that. So the sooner we do it, the risk of the funding gets mitigated. But unless we do it, then that risk, it becomes just greater. It just builds towards the point at which somebody then says, well, I don't see what we're getting out of this. And they basically redirect the money to something else because of pressures in the wider system.
Becca, don't worry, you didn't have to put your hands up, Becca. I was going to give you
That's okay. I just wanted to come back in on that because I don't disagree at all, actually, with what David said, but I think we do have to be clear, or I suppose need to be clearer that there, and it is a real challenge for me as well, this actually, as the director of the programme, is that we have zero analytical resources in the NDR programme. Our scope is to deliver the platform, the data and the tools and the capabilities, but it's not to do the work to realise the value from the data. We are dependent on others to do that with us. And I think that's the challenge, because you're absolutely right. I have to demonstrate value of the NDR. Everybody will want us to start to demonstrate value, but actually that's outside of the programme scope, and that's what trips us up when we start to track benefits and things, because we're not the ones that are going to realise the benefit of it. And so I think, work with organisations, but also, working with our own DHCW teams, Rachel Powell's teams and Iridian, that sort of research innovation space, our own analytical teams in DHCW, we're in the process of migrating our national data warehouse, over into the NDR so that we can make available the new toolings and capabilities. We need to accelerate some of that stuff to do exactly what you've just described, is demonstrate how we as an organisation are actually reaping the benefits of what's being delivered by the programme as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Becca. Hope you feel you had enough time. I mean, huge progress being made, isn't there? Which you must be very pleased with. So well done. Congratulations to all the team. And thank you very much.